Mhm. There you go.
Okay, we are live. We are recording. Go for it.
Very well, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board meeting, Town of East Hampton Planning Board for March 22nd, 2023. We have two matters on for site plan review. We also have a presentation on affordable housing legislation, affordable housing accessory apartments legislation. And we have a public hearing on the Kathleen Dodge application, which is going to go at 7 o'clock. So we're going to do the affordable accessory apartments legislation presentation. Jeremy Samuelson, our planning director, has the floor.
Good evening, members of the board. Thank you for letting me share this presentation with you. I come before you this evening dispatched from the town board for your comments and your input on proposals that would amend an existing section of code 255-1163, which is the accessory affordable apartments section. So very quick background here is there has been some version of this in our code since the early 1980s. It was last amended formally in 2016. And so this is really the section of code that focuses on if you want to put, for lack of a better way of describing it, in your backyard, unattached to your home, or within your home attached to it, an affordable accessory apartment. So everything we're going to talk about here has to meet the criteria of affordable under the town's guidelines, and I'll spell that out a little bit here in a moment. In general, the process from here is that I will share with you the proposed changes as the town board has talked about them now at several work sessions. You're free to ask questions, go deep, take a pass, however you want to handle this. But I'm here to get you answers to the questions you have about this legislation or proposed legislation. And then with your blessing, there would be a recommendation to the town board to either amend or adopt or not adopt at all. So you all have essentially an advisory role here, as is common for legislation that is changes to 255, the zoning chapter of our local town code. So in general, as outlined in the memo that you all received from our department, I'll just read through the bullet points on here for the sake of the folks at home. It's a brief summary of some of the broader changes that are included here. First of all, the definition of a affordable housing unit would be amended under this proposal to identify that unit as being one that could be rented for up to 130% of fair market value, which would constitute an increase that's currently in our code of 110%. Fair market value is established regionally. So this is a number that is basically extracted from various equations that include data from Nassau County and Suffolk County, and they come up with what they think is an appropriate fair market value for a rent that then gets adopted by a local municipality for uses exactly like this. In our case, we know that everything is more expensive out here. And so there is a need to basically adjust or apply a multiplier, as is in our code currently, of 110%. For reasons that I'm happy to get into in a little bit, we're proposing that that number go to 130. The next item I have for you is this legislation would permit affordable accessory apartments in basements of commercial structures. So there are some commercial structures, as I'm sure you know, that currently allow apartments. There are others that do not. This would attempt to equalize across different zoning districts. So the easy example here is limited business overlay. At this point is actually prohibited from having basement apartments, affordable or otherwise. Other types of commercial structures actually have that legal. And we just want to equalize essentially those two sections of code, or those clauses in the code, I should say. This would also propose to increase the permitted number of affordable accessory apartments on residential properties within each school district from a current number of 20 or an allowance of 20 to a total of 40. So at the present moment, we have 100 of these units that are allowed to be built around town. There are exactly 48 of them that have been built since 2016 when the rules last changed. And so one of our early observations in looking at this legislation is if there is such a crushing need for affordable housing in this community and this opportunity exists, why is it that more people have not availed themselves? Why have the other 52 available opportunities not been seized upon? And I think there's many reasons for that. A principal one is that the numbers don't work for the property owner. And so that gets back to this 110% being recommended to go to 130%. It costs money to own one of these things, to actually operate it. And, if you're trying to use this as a way to help offset some of the extraordinary costs of owning a home, we've done the math, and I'll walk you through it in a couple of minutes. Basically, our determination is that having 130% gets you there. But back to the point at hand, the current proposal that is before the town board would actually double the number of units throughout town from a total of 100 units to a total of 200 units. And the way these are spread around town is they correspond to school districts. So each school district currently has an allowance of 20. We would propose under this legislation for each of those districts to have an allowance for a total of 40. Yes, sir.
Is it scaled by the size of the school district, or does each of the school districts in the town have the same absolute number?
The latter, not the former.
Really? Okay.
So in addition, we would propose to increase the permitted number of affordable, I'm sorry, I just read that one, apologies. Permits, this would also permit the affordable accessory apartments in detached structures on lots of 20,000 square feet, whereas previously 30,000 square feet was required. And so what that means is, in general, and I should have framed it this way for you earlier in the conversation, there are two categories here. There is an attached unit and there is a detached unit, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So there are slightly different rules for those two categories here. One of the distinctions is that if you want to have an attached unit, you need to have a lot that is 20,000 square feet, and we don't propose to change that under this legislation. The change that is proposed here is previously, or rather under the existing code, if you wanted to have a detached unit, think of something in your backyard, converting a garage for use as an affordable apartment. Among other restrictions that would apply to that, you would need to have a gross area on your lot of a minimum of 30,000 square feet. That's under current code. And what's proposed here is to actually bring that down to 20,000 square feet, or, as you know well, go from roughly 3/4 of an acre to roughly half an acre.
Well, so I have a question. So if you have an acre of property, can you put 2 accessory apartments on them?
Absolutely not. It's a great question. So one of the things that is already in the legislation and would remain in the legislation is you could get a max of 1 on any given property. So in the existing legislation, or put another way, as the code currently reads, affordable accessory apartments are not allowed in the Harbor Protection Overlay District, or somewhat ironically, the Affordable Housing Overlay District of the town. I honestly have, given a good faith effort to understand why those who came before us decided that affordable housing shouldn't go in the Affordable Housing Overlay. And people have offered me a couple of theories, and frankly, none of them makes any sense, and I won't bore you with them. One of the proposals here is to say that that should be eliminated in the Affordable Housing Overlay, which, let's acknowledge here, there are not many of, right? This is not an overlay that has, sort of a wide expanse. like the harbor protection overlay, it's more applied to individual properties, and perhaps there was some reasoning in there. We would propose under this legislation to take that restriction away, meaning the affordable housing overlay restriction, and allow these to be wherever is appropriate within the community as long as you meet the other standards. As for the harbor protection overlay, as you all know, this legislation was adopted because of concerns surrounding water quality, and very specifically around the acknowledgement that we need to do better in terms of handling our septic waste in this community, and how we recharge that into groundwater, and what the relationship is between groundwater and how that waste then flows through that system and eventually into surface waters. And so when we ask ourselves, where did the clams go? Why are there no scallops? Water quality is often the answer, and nitrogen pollution that is tied directly to septic systems is often the cause. So this was a piece of legislation, or an aspect of this legislation, that made all the sense in the world when it was adopted. What we have before us now is a largely different reality, because since this legislation was last amended in 2016, the county has done a fundamental shift in its approach to managing wastewater within our communities, meaning that new construction, as you know well, requires the installation of an IA, or an innovative and alternative system that actually treats the nitrogen that is in septic waste. So one of the things that is baked into this update that we're proposing for this legislation is that if you are in an HPOD and you want to have one of these affordable accessory units, it becomes mandatory that you switch over to an IA system that actually treats. So we're trying to use carrots and sticks here to bring people along and do the other thing that we know is required to move our community forward for advancing water quality and improving that throughout the town. In addition, this legislation would propose to adjust conditions and terms of leases for affordable accessory apartments. That's a fancy way of saying we'd like to simplify the application process. Basically, at this point, if you want one of these units, and let's remind each other that there are only 48 of the 100 that are allowed that have gone out. One of our assessments as to why that is because it is burdensome and onerous to comply with some of the application. And frankly, it's the reapplication, the annual renewal part of this that makes it difficult. So the legislation that we currently operate under essentially says you have to make a brand new complete application on an annual basis. You have to go out, you have to take fresh photos, you have to document everything all over again, and then you have to resubmit. And we felt that was a barrier to entry when what we're really trying to do, I think, collectively as a community, is find the right ways to actually incentivize and then create appropriate amounts of affordable housing in appropriate ways. So the last bullet I have for you here is that this would permit affordable accessory apartments within residences. So that means the attached as opposed to the detached. This would permit affordable accessory apartments within residences to be up to 50% of the gross floor area of residences, or capped at 1,200 square feet. What that really means is that currently there are size limitations that are baked into the legislation that say basically, you can't have a unit that is above a certain size for an attached unit at this point. And what ends up happening here is we have found many examples where somebody says, look, I want to age in place in my home. My kids have left. I'm, living here now by myself. Why can't I live in the small thing and let the renters live in the big thing, as long as that's done on an affordable basis? And so if you think about multi-generational housing, you think about a family coming back, where you have a parent that is wanting to live in the small unit, and then they want to welcome home one of their kids who either has kids of their own or is married or both of those things, and they want to live in the big space. We've actually made this hard to the extent that which of these pieces will be rented as the affordable component here. And so we wanted to provide maximum leeway so that as long as the affordable guidelines are being met, as long as somebody is complying with the price constraints that are meant to guarantee that these units are being rented affordably, why do we care if it's the big thing that's being rented affordably and solving the problem for more people, or if it's the small thing and it's, solving the problem for a smaller number of people. Mr. Chairman, did you have a question?
Well, so there's no restriction on same family members. There's something I used to hear called a mother-daughter living arrangement or house. There's nothing in this that restricts that. That in fact, it contemplates that. Am I correct on that?
Under the existing legislation, that is allowable as long as you meet the constraints, and we would propose that remains. So the thing that keeps most people who might have a multi-generational household from actually, being closer to what you just laid out is the big permission that comes with one of these units is you get to have 2 kitchens.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I have a friend who has a legal apartment that his mother-in-law lives in, and they're basically a 2-family household. But, for the sake of all of their sanity, they have 2 kitchens. Right. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have to eat together. They don't have to share that space except when they want to share that space. And so there's a separate entrance, there's a separate parking space, and everybody gets to have that separate area to call their own.
Okay, but there's no restriction on it both being in the same family, both
Correct.
being related. That's
correct. And very interestingly, what we have found, we went out and we did what amounts to a survey of the people who have both gone through this program and maintain a unit, and people who thought they wanted to do a unit but eventually either surrendered it after a couple of years or just walked away from the application process altogether. We wanted to understand sort of what was keeping people from saying yes to the program, as it were. And what we found was really 2 major things. The first one was that people are willing to do this under the current legislation when it is for a family member, right? You're actually not obliged to charge anything for one of these units. You could, for a relative, I assume you wouldn't do it for some stranger off the street, but for a relative, you could create one of these units, get the permit, and you could charge them nothing. So there is no minimum. There is only a maximum, that 130% that we talked about before. So that gives somebody latitude where they want to fall in there. My kid's home from college. They've got a job for the summer. I'm going to charge them something, but I'm not going to give it to them for nothing. I'm going to charge them something, but I don't have to go to the max, right? Things you're willing to do for family that you wouldn't do for other people. So we found that was sort of the greatest segment of people who said yes to this program was people who wanted to help a relative. The other category was people who had a staffing issue and wanted to create one of these units so that there would essentially be workforce or employee housing, right?
and I guess somebody might want to have domestic help living in the house.
Well, a lot of
own, but
one of the other situations that we found is that folks who need home health aides.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Right. So, if you have a situation where, look, we all want our privacy, but you still need somebody right there, and that person deserves their own privacy, right? So this is one of the intents here, let me put it this way, is that it allows people to stay in their homes. I mean, how many people has each of us known and had to say goodbye to because they can't afford to stay in this community anymore, right? If you own a 2,500 square foot house that you raised a family in, maybe you've lost a spouse, who knows how your world has changed. But if you have the ability to remain in your home and continue to use that in a way that opens a portion of it up to somebody else, but ensures privacy at the same time, why are we not using space that is already built within this community to house people who desperately need it? How many times has any of us driven around in any month in the off season and sort of bemoaned all of the empty square footage that is out there that could be applied to the need for housing in this community? So I don't think people are suddenly going to turn over the keys to their whole house, but to solve the housing crisis. But if there's a way to have people use a portion of that, get the permit, put up the wall, create the separate entrance, use the space over the garage, transition the garage, any of those things, there's a lot of latitude and flexibility that's built into this.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have if you want to thumb through it and ask specific questions.
On that last point that you just talked about, did you you came up with the 130% factor when I first saw that, I thought, it might be unrealistic, not unrealistic, but unfair to the landlords here in this area, because you're using as a base an average of Nassau, Suffolk County, which is a lot less. But you take care of that by manipulating the multiple, the 130%. How did you come up with 130%? Because a lot of the examples that you just talked about are familial, family-oriented situations where people might not even, like you said, not even want to charge the maximum. However, have you thought about, or does this incentivize people to do this on a financial, economic basis to make money? That they have a little extra room, they don't need it, they have space in their property, that kind of thing. Did you think about that, and how big of a piece of the pie do you expect that to be of people who take advantage of this program?
So at the moment, it is almost none of the pie, and we think that that's a lost opportunity, and we propose to grow that. To what extent, I don't know, but I'll share some numbers with you that I think fill in some of the blanks around why 130%. So I'll start by sharing with you that the federal government has a rough standard, whether it is for renters or for home buyers, that you should not be spending more than a third of your household income on putting a roof over your head, right? And now that's an almost laughable standard for us out here. I mean, the numbers that would be required for people to only spend a third of their income on housing out here, it just doesn't work. So nonetheless, we adhered to that standard, and we said, if you look at the current guidelines at 110% of what somebody could afford, under the current guidelines, what that means for us locally is that somebody would have a household income of $67,140. Just call it $67,000, right? So what that means is not that one person has to make $67,000, but the household has to make $67,000. One of the pieces that is baked into this legislation, or the proposed changes to this legislation that I didn't enumerate, and I apologize for this, is we would propose that the current limitation on one bedroom for an affordable accessory apartment would go away, and that would become 2 bedrooms, and there would be a hard cap at 2 bedrooms. There is no opportunity to go beyond that. So think of the various scenarios that become possible when you go to 2 bedrooms. You could have 2 people who aren't a couple, who would each have their own space. You could have a single parent with a child. You could have 2 parents and a child. You could have up to potentially 4 adults in 2 bedrooms. That complies with all of the state laws that govern, who can sort of cohabitate with whom. So when you think about how do you pay for either a 1-bedroom on the one hand or a 2-bedroom on the other hand, you would have a household income that would need to be able to pay the rent here that would cap out at $67,000. The sad reality of the community where we find ourselves living right now is that there are many people who make twice that amount who cannot find an affordable place to live. There's a term of art here that gets applied when you talk to housing experts, and they use this expression, missing middle. And what they mean by that is that, folks at the high end are doing great. Thank you very much. Folks at the low end, as much as they struggle, often have the opportunity to tap into existing programs. And we need to do everything we can to help every single one of those families and those individuals, not trying to take anything away from them. But at the same time, we need to create opportunity for that middle section, that missing middle, where frankly, people leave town because, right? They get to a certain age, they get to a certain professional credential, and they hit that wall and they say, I'm never going to be able to afford a house here. I'm 35 years old, I'm 45 years old, I'm 55 years old, and I'm living with 3 roommates, right? Because there is nothing affordable in this community, and the obvious answer becomes to leave. So if you look at the math at 130% of area median income, then what you get to is a household income of $79,000. So what that really means is two people who are making a hair under $40,000 each, or one person who's getting what qualifies out here as something that just begins to count as a middle class wage, right? So if you think of two parents and a kid who are on a monthly basis paying $2,200 for rent, that's what the 130% comes in at. That's a very reasonable rent in East Hampton town at this time, right? I'll give you a list of 100 people right now who would, beat down the door to pay $2,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment in this community. So that's on the half of the equation that counts as sort of the expense portion, right? When you go, to sort of the revenue portion, if you will, for the landlord, you're starting to get this into a territory where you're talking about somebody who might have a $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 mortgage a month on a house that counts as an entry-level home in this community. And if they're able to pay, somewhere on the order of, 25, 30, or even 50% of their mortgage by actually creating one of these units, well, now they're incentivized to do it. So that's how we landed on the 130 number. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. That's very good. Just one more point, if you allow me. On the HPOD, I have a little problem with that because, on other situations that come in front of us, or just in general about the way we think about the community, is we're trying to get less development around coastal areas near bodies of water because there is a water quality problem. So almost every application that comes before us, that's always an issue. That's a primary issue of concern. And like I said, in general, that's also a concern of everyone who thinks environmentally in this town, that you want to do less near the coastal areas, not more, not motivate people to build more. So it seems to me that what this is doing is the latter. As good an intention you have, I still think, in my eyes, and maybe you can convince me otherwise, that this does more harm than good. So to me, the water quality issue is much more important for this little segment of the affordable housing issue. So how do you answer that?
Well, Lou, I've known you a while, and I learned a long time ago not to try to convince you of anything. So, but I will share with you an observation, and that is that basically right now, somebody could have a 4-bedroom house in a HPOD area, right? And they could be using that house with an old antiquated septic. And unless and until they come in and seek a building permit for a major renovation or a tear down or a redevelopment, there's nothing that is ever going to trigger them to actually upgrade to an IA system. That house could continue with that old, uninspected, maybe not even having a tank system, as many of them do. I mean, Ditch Plains, your neck of the woods, you and I have shared stories over the years about old systems that are collapsing brick systems with tar paper going to them, right? These are what we find in some of these HPOD areas. And what I would put to you is that this program doesn't necessarily require new construction or the addition of any bedrooms. In fact, one of the things that I think is likely to happen under this program, using HPOD as an example, is somebody who has a 4-bedroom house or even a 3-bedroom house wants to use one of those bedrooms to create, or even 2 of those bedrooms to create an affordable accessory apartment in HPOD. And this would actually require them to do what nothing else in the code does, which is update their septic system in HPOD.
Your record of not convincing me is still intact.
Well, I'm glad to know I'm consistent. Yeah.
Just in case there was any doubt.
Exactly.
Hey, Jeremy, I have a question from Zoom over here.
Yes, sir.
I think this is very sensible, by the way. I think all these amendments make perfect sense to me. I really like what's been done here. I just wanted to clarify one issue, though. There are no regulations around renters. Is that right? There's no registration. There's no income requirements for them. Is that the case? Do I have that right?
So, sort of. So the interest of the town, as I would describe it, is in ensuring that there is an affordable unit that is rented affordably, right? And who that is rented to, I would observe, is not necessarily the business of the town, with the exception of the fact that it has to be done in one of two ways, either on an annual basis, right? So on an annual basis, this unit has to be recertified. The person has to come in and fill out an updated application. We're proposing a much simpler form here than currently exists. And so the landlord and the renter would need to submit an affidavit with their application on an annual basis that says, this person owns the property, this is the person who's going to rent it, and here's the amount they're going to rent it for, and it's being rented on a year-round basis. Right? So those are sort of the criteria for who can. That's category number one. Category number two is that the town board, in acknowledging that in addition to having a year-round affordable housing crisis, we also have a seasonal or workforce housing crisis. And so they are proposing, as part of this legislation, to have a certain number of units, and the number at the moment is 5 within each of the school districts. So if they go to 40, 5 of those 40 in each school district would be eligible to be rented on a less than year-round basis, right? And so it would still have to be affordable. It would still have to be, certified on an annual basis. And one of the examples here is somebody who owns a business, has an employee, but that employee only needs to be here for either the height of the season or for an extended season, and they don't want somebody who doesn't work for them living in their house the rest of the year. Right. So they have help that, comes in and, runs the shop or whatever, fill in the blank, starting in April and is going to be here through October. So why force those people to sign a year round with each other when that actually doesn't address their need? So I'll pause there and see if that addresses your question at all.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. That makes sense to me. And I like the idea of the seasonal thing too. That was going to be my next question, actually. So just one related question, which is, you've mentioned the $2,200 cap, which is the 130% of a fair market value for 2-bedroom. How does a prospective applicant get the information to understand what the rent could be for other sizes of units? Where is that information?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think the housing.
Where does someone who's looking at this and making sure that it makes financial sense for them to take this route, how do they understand what the current, rent cap is for various sizes of apartments?
Okay, I think I'm getting you now. So in essence, in order for somebody to rent one of these apartments, the landlord would already have to have the permit in place. And,
Right.
So that's like, get your permit. Okay, now you're eligible. And then that person would advertise the apartment at whatever price. In order for that unit to be occupied, there would have to be, as I said before, there would have to be the affidavit from the landlord or the property owner and the person who's renting it, and the numbers on there have to agree. One person can't say, I'm charging this poor bugger $4,000, and the other guy can't say I'm paying this guy $2,000. The numbers have to line up, and so on an annual basis, there's a review process. Let's say that somebody's permit expires on April 1st. They would be notified in writing by the building department in advance that says your permit is getting ready to expire. Please be advised that if you do not renew your permit by the end of your permit period, then you will no longer have an affordable accessory apartment that is legal under East Hampton Town Code. And therefore, it will be illegal for you to rent this space to anybody on an affordable basis or otherwise, for any price, because you have now lapsed in your permit. Right. And if they want to keep the unit in the program, then they have to go to the building department office, reapply with a simplified application form. And then when they want to take occupancy, they've found the right person and there's an agreement on price that is at the cap or below, then they both need to submit the affidavit. And it's not legal to occupy the apartment unless and until all of those things happen.
So that's very helpful to know. I was actually asking a different question, which obviously I did very poorly, which is, how does someone who is looking to apply to build a unit to be part of this program get this very simple question to get the information about what those caps are, where the fair market value information that would say, all right, if you're planning a 1-bedroom, this is it. If you're planning a 2, this is it for 2023. Where is that information?
That is right there as part of the application process.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Simple enough. Thank you.
Is there a retroactive function on this, that if there's somebody out there, well, maybe many people out there, who have what could be an apartment in their house, that they can legalize it, or is this only prospective?
No, one of our sincere hopes, and I mean, I'm really glad you're bringing this up, because I think sometimes we tend to kid ourselves a little bit about, well, if we make these rules really hard, then we mean that the bad thing won't happen. And in this case, what we know is when we have overly onerous restrictions around things like creating affordable apartments for people, then it goes underground. And you have these horrible situations that are unsafe. You have people living in conditions that don't meet state standards, don't meet local code. So one of the things that we are hopeful for here is that if we demonstrate that there are units available, that they are actually affordable, and that it is not onerous to either apply or renew on an annual basis, then actually that keeps you off of the radar of code enforcement, and there's a path towards being somebody who's walking in the light as opposed to the alternative. There are, I would venture to guess, hundreds, if not more than that, illegal apartments in this community. And I, every week, live in fear of something god-awful happening.
And so the idea here is this would allow at least a number of those to become koshered.
Correct.
to use a phrase.
That is a hope.
And I have a question too. So here, as a board, we've come up with situations where apartments are being proposed on commercial properties. I see that you have a basement, thing, but what about a detached affordable apartment on a CI zone? Was that considered?
Not as part of this. And so I'm really glad you asked that question, because what I would say 99.9% of the changes to the code that we've talked about this evening are applied to residential. The exception to that is the LBO piece that I mentioned before. If we get across the finish line with this piece of legislation, the town board has said that the next thing they want us to look at is basically affordable apartments attached to commercially zoned properties, whether they're CI, neighborhood business, LBO, et cetera. Because I think there's a couple of things that we can do, always within the appropriate constraints of, health, safety, welfare, compliance with fire code, egress, all of those things, as baseline standards that have to be met here. But if we can do that, and there can be apartments in, whatever zoning district of commercial we've got that are either in a basement or on a second story or detached in a backyard and would be new construction, then I think we want to give people clear guidance on what the standards are that would have to be met. So that's a long way of saying that's the next task that we're being handed.
No, I think this is a great step. I really do. The other point I wanted to make, so I think Springs, of course, I think they're capped already, right? They already have 20, I think so they're going to get 20 more.
So ironically, yeah, so yes, but just one slight correction. They actually have a hair under 20. The only of the 5 districts that has met their 20 so far is the East Hampton School District. And we have a list of people who are waiting if this legislation goes through in East Hampton in particular. But, to your broader point, Springs is a close second, not quite at 20.
This person said they had been denied, but maybe they were in East Hampton. So I can just imagine, and I understand why schools, don't want to get inundated with more kids, but I can imagine Amagansett probably has none.
Amagansett has very few. I think I have the numbers here. Waynescott is the only one with none. They had one.
So, no, I can imagine though. So we know where these, pockets of need are going to be.
Right.
So I just.
Well, in line with that, why then are you doing the school districts on an equal number? That's the question I asked. Why?
Well, I can imagine they don't want to inundate a school system, but.
Yeah, but at the same time, you've got this wonderful program, and it's not going to serve the broadest need. and it's going to overserve, if you will, an area that's not, it's never going to meet that number or not likely to anytime soon meet that number. So why not an adjustment,
Yeah.
at least a little bit of an adjustment?
Well, I can just see you'll never get to the 200, I guess, because of just there's going to be these districts that are never going to.
Yeah, Amagansett and Wainscott,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're just not going to hit that number. So if they're not going to hit that number, why not move some of that? Is the idea just like Sharon's saying, because otherwise you'll inundate the school district?
I think the board has talked a lot about caps and not wanting to sort of open this too broadly too quickly for all of the reasons that you all have described. I think there has been an assessment here that there are many reasons why people have not elected to avail themselves of these opportunities, whether that is across town or in a given district, right? So I'll share with you that Amagansett currently has a whopping 2. Wainscott had 1, but lost it because they were basically using it illegally and attempting to rent it out as an Airbnb. That got picked up on very quickly by code enforcement. They were shut down and their license was withdrawn, right? So
You're not allowed to ask.
yeah. So Springs has 15, Montauk has 6, and East Hampton has the full 20. So I think the rationale of the board has been that there are many reasons why people have not availed themselves of this. And what they're hoping here is that if they increase the allowance and adjust the rules at the same time, that will give them the opportunity to gauge what the actual total interest is. In other words, they have pledged to come back and review this at some interval and say, even though there are 40 available in Wainscott, we're still getting no takers. And then that informs a conversation about why.
Okay, so this is kind of the initial step. And as we go, we'll, well, not we, but the
Pilot.
folks who sit here will adjust.
Correct.
All right, that's a good step.
So
Randy, go ahead.
I agree. To a lot of work into this. Thank you very much. You did a great job. Really, everybody did a great job getting this as far as it's gone. So
I sense a but.
no, I'm just gonna.
You're opening a door here.
So in the example you gave of an enforcement, let's say in Wainscott. So this person has installed a second kitchen. Maybe they've even built a detached unit. And now their permit gets lifted. So how do you see that? They have to rip the kitchen out? Okay.
Yeah. And that is what happened.
Okay.
It's not theoretical.
Okay. And then suppose it was detached, they would take the kitchen out, then you've got this detached something.
Yeah.
With plumbing and electric.
Well, some plumbing is allowed, as you know. I mean, you could have, a sink under some circumstances. You're allowed the electric, but you're not allowed the toilet. You're not allowed the shower. You're not allowed a bedroom. You're not allowed a kitchen.
Do you think that enforcement for a detached unit would involve internal, walls coming down? I know this is going to work itself out, but I guess I'm raising it as I mean, I think the thing to do is to basically go with something. It's a very serious problem here, and this is a very good effort here, and then we'll fine tune it. But I guess our job is to just try to give you some concerns. The seasonal, picking up on some other comments, like, so there's language in here about residency, domicile, that both the tenant and the landlord have to be domiciled here.
I can shed some light on that if you like.
Well, I'm just wondering with a seasonal, if it's a seasonal workforce unit, the person may be domiciled elsewhere. Okay.
Yeah, so just a couple of details on that. So the existing legislation was written in a way that required that this be the primary residence of the property owner, and that the person who is going to rent would be an East Hampton town resident. right? That's what's in the current code, which also has a year-round occupancy requirement for both the owner of the property and the renter.
Mhm.
That's what is in the current code. What we're proposing here is that the owner of the property be resident and that is their primary residence. Right. So they could, yes, go to Florida for 2 months, but this is still their primary residence. And so we actually had people who gave us feedback. Remember, I said we went out and we found a bunch of people who had taken a pass on this program. And we said, why? And some of them said, I spent 3 months in Florida. I'm not eligible for the program. We said, well, that's silly. Just because you're sitting in Florida doesn't mean that, the space in your converted garage couldn't be legally used as an apartment. We thought that was incongruous for that to be the outcome. So essentially, what is different here is that the property owner must be resident. This must be their primary residence. They can own however many, houses their fortunate circumstance allows them to, but this has to be their primary residence. And then the renter is meant to be a resident of East Hampton Town, but more important than their residency, because what's the definition of a residence? It's somebody who lives here. So if I rent you an apartment and you live here, you're automatically a resident, right? So we felt that was a bit of a paper tiger in terms of a standard that we wanted to set. So instead, what we have said, and I left this out of the workforce housing piece earlier, is if you are going to rent one of these units as a seasonal employee, you have to demonstrate that you're employed within the town of East Hampton.
Okay.
And we say what that means in terms of provide a pay stub, an affidavit from your employer. We give some guidelines for what that could mean. And the intent here is to not have somebody who wants to come out here, rent a lovely place for the summer, go to the beach, use up one of our precious affordable units and say, well, I'm writing my novel. And you say, well, I hope that's going well for you, but where are the people at the grocery store going to live when they go home at the end of the day? Right. So our intent is to actually provide housing for people who are working here, not people who just want to be here.
So that'll be then that the owner has to be a full-time resident. They vote here, let's say, and the tenant seasonally has to demonstrate that they have a job here.
Correct.
Well, I think that works. That's good.
Yeah.
Let me see what else. So I tend to agree. I don't like to. It's not that I don't like to agree with Lou, but I do agree with him. I don't like to further limit this, but I have a problem with the HPOD too, because, well, all the things that Lou said, but also because these new septic systems reduce nitrogen. They don't eliminate it. And so by putting more people in the HPOD potentially, even if they're on a low nitrogen system, we're still bringing more nitrogen into the HPOD. So I would just say that I agree with Lou that maybe doing it in HPOD, I'm just not completely comfortable with it. I think it's in conflict, as Lou said. I think it's in conflict with the water quality issues. I don't know exactly how you would remedy that. Most of these houses, I think, are going to use one system, even if it's a detached unit.
You would only be allowed one system. It would be an extraordinary circumstance where you would have more than one.
So it's a one system. As you said, it's a house that could have, you could have a 12-person family legally. But here we're saying, we're kind of encouraging more density in the HPOD. I don't know. I'm still unsure of that. So I guess Lou and I feel the same way.
Yeah, just to add one quick point to that. I think there's a contradiction when we're calling for CPF to buy property along East Lake Drive to preserve it, and then we're incentivizing people to build more density on the same location. So I think that just doesn't sit well with me.
Are there any statistics on that?
Well, one number that I would share with you is that, picking up on what Member Parsons was saying, your average septic system, your traditional septic system, which let's just acknowledge doesn't treat nitrogen. Right. It just doesn't. All it does is, treat nitrogen as a pass through along with, all of the pharmaceutical waste and, anything else that's in your system. Right. So those are typically showing up at somewhere around 80 to 90 parts of nitrogen per, and I think it's per million is the number, but the 80 to 90 is the range here. In order to even be legal as a system that's certified in Suffolk County, the IA systems, regardless of which technology you're using, have to be at 19 parts or lower. And many of these systems are testing in the sort of, 12 to 15 range, and they have to be tested and certified on an annual basis, which an existing septic system doesn't. So, I would actually argue that, there's a fair point that you have each raised about just greater construction within an area, meaning HPOD, where potentially we don't want to see that, or we don't want to at least encourage it or incentivize it. So, conceding that and acknowledging that part of the point. But if one of the reasons we don't want to see that extra growth is because there's an implicit connection or an explicit connection to the amount of nitrogen that gets produced, well, if you're reducing that amount of nitrogen by, a factor of 5 right out of the gate, I think that's actually a huge leap forward.
But that's if you tied the direct reduction of nitrogen to this program. I mean, we're trying to reduce nitrogen in so many different ways. One of them I just mentioned, the CPF fund, just preserving land. And we are trying to get people to convert to IA systems. And we're thinking further down the road about a wastewater management system, whatever. But we are trying to reduce nitrogen. It's not as though this is the one item that's going to cause people to get rid of their old system. And
I would argue that that's the $2,200 a month that's going to convince them. And if that convinces them, and a requirement is, and you have to update your septic system, and the town has a grant funding stream that'll pay for you to do it, then I think that gets them to yes. Whereas in the alternative, they're not going to at all.
Yeah, I think you have a good point there. It's sort of a double whammy, right? We get housing and we get nitrogen reduction.
Do we know how many houses we're talking about that potentially
Well, the caps, give us the guidelines for where the maximum in the program right now. So there's 100 of these that are currently possible within the town. We have 48 that have, already been done. None of them in HPOD.
That's what I'm wondering. How many are we talking about here?
Well, it could be a lot, right? We don't know.
No. Yeah. I mean, there's no way to prognosticate what that's going to be.
If they all went into HPOD, then
that's.
I'm sorry, Sharon, what was that?
Well, I mean, it's hard for us to know. If they all go into HPOD, it would be a max of 20 more, let's say in Montauk, or a max of,
Yeah, you're right.
Well, potentially, I mean, trying to find a path forward here for the conversation. If you all are inclined for most of this, and Lou isn't shooting at a lot of it, so I'll take cold comfort in that. But the piece that we've focused in on in terms of nitrogen reduction, our shared goal here, perhaps if you are inclined to move this forward with a recommendation to adopt to the town board, I would urge you to flag your concerns around nitrogen reduction, and potentially to have there be either maintain the exclusion for HPOD if people get behind, sort of Lou's rationale here, or to put a cap on the number of units that might be eligible within HPOD.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you need from us at this point tonight?
So just some type of, letter that says, board has considered this. We had the following concerns that we would ask you to think about, and any recommendations that you have.
I have some more questions.
I do too.
So let me.
Nice try, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, no, it's
I understand.
we're on an hour. We're about an hour, which is about a half an hour longer than I anticipated.
So
That's fine.
So, Jeremy, if I like what you said about the seasonal being tied to a job, right? So now let's go to the year-round.
When I saw it, I'm
The
like, this is gonna be long.
year-round renter could be somebody working on their novel, right?
Potentially.
The way it's written now, It could be a year-round family that doesn't work here at all. They just want to live here and but they have to be, but in that, well, actually, we're not, as to Ed's point, we're not defining them in any way. Let me give you an example. So let's say I'm a wealthy hedge fund.
Who wants to live in somebody else's garage?
I was gonna say, really?
Well, I can have a 1,200 square foot apartment.
I have a garage in Springs that hedge fund guy is welcome to come live in. Yeah. It's a 2-car. Come on down. We got you.
Okay. So I work for a wealthy hedge fund.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I'm retiring. I'm married, and I have two children who are 17. And I have an income of, let's use Joe Biden's number, of $400,000 a year. And I want to come out and live in a 1,200 square foot apartment with 2 bedrooms. Right now, that would be possible. I'm not saying it's probable, but
Not under current code, but I think you're asking under the code as proposed.
so we don't have any other criteria, which is, on a pilot trial basis, fine. We don't have any other criteria about the tenant. We don't have an income limit on the tenant. We don't have a job requirement on the tenant. So it's pretty open right now. So that would be something maybe to watch. That's all. I would say we watch that, see who ends up there. Let me see what I think we got a lot of them.
Watch out for those hedge fund managers.
Yeah, I thought maybe defining seasonal rental, because you said something less than 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, is that necessary? What if somebody has a business where they only need somebody for a month? That's okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, in that instance, you have to say, what would motivate somebody to only to create this space, get the permit, and then take a pass on 11 months of income in favor of 1 month of income?
Especially
Okay.
if it's capped at $2,200.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I think that's it. I would,
Motion to close. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, one more.
We have Michael. We have Michael over here.
Then Mike-
So Randy, I have
You
two
can think about
Go
it.
ahead, Michael.
I have 2 questions. Randy sort of asked this, and I just want to go a little further. Let's say I have a detached apartment, and I apply for 3 years, and then on the 4th year, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
I want to keep the apartment as like a guest house.
Nope. It's a hard no.
That with a kitchen, especially without the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
But what if I just apply next year? Still no. But you're saying, you have to reapply every year,
Yep.
right? And part of the application process is this person's renting it. You have to.
Yeah, you gotta show that person.
My other question is the size of the apartment. It's 300 to 600 square feet. And in this document too, you say you can have 2 bedrooms and 2 people in each bedroom.
So actually, those numbers
It's 450 to
Yeah.
1,200.
1,200, yeah.
for an
1,200.
attached.
How about for a detached?
So
What's-
a detached has a cap of 600 square feet. And the reason that's the number is we wanted to mirror other sections of code that have a limit on accessory structures that max out at 600 square feet. The exception to that is for an artist studio, which can go up to 900 square feet. Baked into this is you can't have an artist studio and one of these. Right? It's an either or. So a detached has a cap of 600. Excuse me. I said 600. I meant 800. I apologize. Sorry. Mouth was moving faster than my brain. So the detached has a cap of 800. Yeah, go ahead.
That's new to me. Oh, that's changed?
That is proposed to be changed in the code. So existing, yes, has a 600.
Affordable accessory apartment shall be a minimum of 300 square feet and a maximum of 600 square feet.
Which
Under
page are you on?
Under X.
Which page is that the
There are
version
no
that has the
numbers
page number?
here.
I'm sorry?
I don't have any numbers on this, but it's
I think that's
the
current.
second to
I
last
think you're,
page.
maybe current code you're
Design
looking at?
requirements,
sign
X,
requirements.
the top of the page. Top of
If it's-
the,
This is mine is crossed out though. So
But that's what the underneath it is the
that's,
new
this is the new one. The one that's
text for
underlined.
the,
So catch me up. Where are you in the code here?
if you see X,
255-11-63H, design requirements. Paragraph 1 is amended to read in its entirety as follows. 1, a detached affordable accessory apartment shall be a minimum of 300 square feet and a maximum of 600 square feet. An attached affordable accessory apartment shall be a minimum of 300 square feet and a maximum of 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling unit not to exceed 1,200 square feet. I was looking before at the other one.
So I'm going to go with what's on the page and not stand by that 800 number that I offered you a moment ago as a correction. So I
recommend-
apologize
I
for
would
the
recommend you
confusion.
Make it 800.
Okay, well,
If you're going to have four
yeah.
people potentially in a 600 square foot, that's pretty tight. It's pretty tight space. And I'm just curious, and you mentioned that, 600 was the sort of standard
Correct.
throughout the code.
Yeah.
But I don't know. People are living in this place.
So
well, that may not be a
there's,
two-bedroom though.
I'm sorry,
I will say, well, that may not become a two-bedroom apartment.
precisely. So
It could, according to
if you,
code.
if you meet the square area requirement for minimum bedroom size, which I don't have memorized, but it exists, then, you're allowed a bedroom. That's, so I would go with Sharon's answer here and say, if 600 is your max on a detached, and ironically, I did initially propose 800, and that's why I think I was confused, and the board said, no, that feels like too much, and we pulled it back. So basically, if you're trying to make 600 square feet work, you're likely going to be something more like a studio or a one bedroom. Is somebody going to try to put a two bedroom in there? Sure. But they're also then going to have to turn around and find somebody to rent it.
But so where did I see
Seasonal.
the two bedroom
On the attached.
on the attached? Okay. Sorry.
Right. And the attached could go up to 1,200 square
1,200,
feet as a cap.
But
If you could make that 600, I would be very supportive of every line of this thing.
Clarify
800, did I
for
say
me.
800, you meant to say 800.
800.
That now you're picking up on my.
See?
Yeah. All right.
You got somebody supporting you,
All
right?
right. All right.
Let's wrap this.
I think you could have seasonal kind of dormitory type
In a 600.
housing. But, okay, quickly. Is the planning board going to issue these permits?
No, not at all. Yeah. Planning department, you mean?
Who's going to issue the,
Building department.
okay, because there's something in here that says planning board, but, okay, building department will issue it administratively.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. No hearing required.
Okay, then where there's a section about parking. Two off-street parking spaces shall be provided for in a driveway. That could get pretty muddy. I mean, we're not having any review of the layout of the parking, what the surface is, anything.
If you need to change your parking arrangement, then that triggers a building permit. So this does not obviate you from the requirements for any construction standards.
Well, I don't know. Do you need a building permit to rearrange parking on a residential lot? Not sure you do.
Putting gravel down
Oh, putting.
counts as a structure.
Well, what if-
Paving counts as a structure.
What if you don't do anything? though?
What if the last thing we want is to have them to come to planning board?
No,
There
I
goes-
don't- I'm not
there goes
suggesting that.
Any
I'm
owners.
just suggesting that
Yeah,
there,
that's the end of, yes.
maybe there's a minimum standard for what the parking needs to be.
Well, there is 2 off-street parking spaces that are required.
That's it. But we use aisles and all that stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of the neighbors and all of that, and that parking can be so ad hoc.
Doesn't the building permit have those same requirements of aisles?
No, not if it's a residential property, it doesn't. All right, we'll just express it as a concern that the parking is going to be determined by each lot owner somewhere along their driveway. If you have a flag strip driveway, there's not enough room really to put cars. I think
Not necessarily so. I mean, you could have a flag strip and then each individual house on the flag strip has their own parking.
Yeah,
could be
but I mean,
sufficient.
anyway, I raise it as a concern that the parking is important because it's going to affect the people next door, et cetera.
There's-
And, I rent a house now, they have 5 cars there.
Well, it says at least 2, this is paragraph AA. At least 2 off-street parking spaces shall be provided for in a driveway on the lot for the affordable accessory apartment in addition to that parking already utilized by the property owner. The parking of vehicles of the owner and the tenant on the street or on any property other than the lot on which the affordable accessory apartment is located, or parking overnight of more than 4 vehicles on said lot shall be prohibited.
Okay, we've explored it enough. I mentioned it as a concern. What happens if you get a permit and you leave it empty?
Then, why would we renew you? I guess is the question. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing that we maybe didn't reach yet are all those houses that you and I see, seasonal houses, second homes that are empty, that will not meet the requirement because the owners are not domiciled here.
Mhm.
And we may in the future want to try to reach those houses because as you well know, there's a lot of them and they sit empty all year practically, except for a month or 2 in the summer.
The owners may like it that way.
Yeah, they may have, anyway.
I see
Well,
houses that are empty. I
incentivizing.
see houses that are empty 12 months out of the year.
Exactly.
I see houses-
Depending upon how bad the year is.
I don't understand it. I walk by them all the time.
Maybe in the future we'll say something other than you have
You
to
can't
be
make owners do
domiciled here for
anything.
certain
Well, that's the-
Yeah.
types of.
Yeah.
What would you like from this board? What do you
Letter.
need? You need a
I-
letter from us?
A letter, yes, but I would like, actually, Nancy, I saw you leaning around. Did you want to answer that?
No, it's just,
Oh, all right, so-
just getting a look at you.
Yeah, all right, you got it.
With Tina. and
What's that?
No, Tina. Is
Oh,
she'll compose something.
yeah, exactly. I think your comments, we'll put it back in front of you for review. Mr. Chairman, we'll send it to you to make sure we have, faithfully reflected your comments. Lou, as always, I mean, I'm happy to try to give voice to the concerns that you've shared with us. But I guess I would ask you, not even necessarily a formal vote, but, what action would you recommend to the town board here? Is it that they move forward with caveats, they move forward as is, noting
Go to public hearing.
specific concerns? Yeah.
Cool.
I did find the planning board,
What was the reference?
it's 25550C7. It says
What's the the letter?
it's C
Oh, C.
25550. The owner of the building in which it is proposed to locate may apply for this special permit. The planning board shall require that such applicant execute such agreements, contracts, easements, covenants, deed restrictions.
Yeah, that's it.
Maybe that's for commercial.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the first couple pages of code, that applies to commercial
Yeah.
and is largely unchanged with the exception of the reference to the LBO that I mentioned
Yeah,
before.
That would be a site plan.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we're basically not before you this evening on that.
And that's very,
Portion.
very few changes on that.
Right.
All right, so do we want to, do you want like a sense of the board or?
That would be helpful, yes.
What's the sense of the board?
I think it's great. I mean, I think, I think there's maybe could possibly be some limitations on HPOD, if you,
Yeah, but otherwise, I think I think
Yeah.
you've gotten a very favorable opinion. And we're all grateful that this is being done and it should move forward.
and then maybe later look at how they're running in the different school districts.
Yeah, that's something that you might want to look at sooner rather than later, because if this is successful, you're going to have excess capacity in one place and insufficient availability in another. And it's easily enough remedied, so.
Yeah.
Ed, anything?
Nothing further. I think this is a great start, like everybody else is saying. It's, we really need this. There's no question about it. And I think, we've already pointed out a few things that maybe some of the board members have some questions about, and they'll be documented, right? But I think we're all agreeing, full steam ahead. Great work, Jeremy.
Okay, so
Well, this is not a Jeremy thing. This is many people's work. So thank you.
Jeremy and many
you're
people.
you're the guy out front on it, so.
You're the front man.
So you get, if it had gone the other way, you'd
Yeah,
still
right.
be hearing from
I'd be
us.
naming those people
Right.
for you. Yeah, all right. Thank you all for your time and
Thanks,
your
Jeremy.
thoughtful comments.
Great job, Jeremy.
Yep, have a great evening.
That's a
Applause.
Yeah, I know. Look at that. Get out while
Those
the
are
getting's good.
future employers right there.
Before we move on to the two work session matters that I didn't expect to both be at this point, but you will be. We'll have a public hearing that we'll read in. Is anybody here for the public hearing? Any members of you're here on that public hearing? Okay, very well.
Okay, I read the whole thing?
I'm afraid you do.
Public hearing notice. Take notice that a public hearing will be held before the East Hampton Town Planning Board at Town Hall, 159 Pantago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the application of map of Kathleen Dodge minor subdivision approval pursuant to Chapter 220 subdivision of land of the East Hampton Town Code to divide a parcel into two individual lots. Proposed Lot 1 will contain 24,157 square feet. Proposed Lot 2 will contain 22,287 square feet. The parcel contains 46,444 square feet, which is 1.066 acres, and is located on the east side of Middle Highway, East Hampton, and is situated in a B residence zoning district as shown on the official zoning map of the town of East Hampton, and are identified on the Suffolk County tax map as parcel number 300-144.1-1-84. Subject application is classified as an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA, Part 617 of the New York Code of Rules and Regulations, and Chapter 128 Environmental Quality Review of the Town Code. A survey, George Walbridge Surveyors PC, dated revised September 27, 2022, is available for inspection at the Planning Board offices, 300 Pantago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York. The public hearing will be held live and in person by the Planning Board and will be available electronically by video and teleconferencing, and will be televised on local TV, LTV Channel 22, and available for live stream on the LTV website, www.ltveh.org. The public shall be permitted to appear in person, but may also provide comments on the matter being heard by calling 351-888-6331. Any person or party wishing to be heard with respect to the foregoing may do so in person or by agent or by attorney or by call-in to the live stream or by written comment addressed to the Planning Board, 300 Pantago Place, Suite 103, East Hampton, New York, 11937. Comments may also be submitted to the Planning Board by email to planningboard@ehamptonny.gov. All comments must be received by the Planning Board by the date and time of the public hearing. Dated March 1st, 2023, Samuel Kramer, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Lou. Nancy, do we have jurisdiction?
Yes, we do. I reviewed the affidavit of service and posting, and it does appear that it was properly noticed.
Very well. Nina, you want to give us a little background?
I have the map on the screen. Everybody can see. This is Eric's application. It's a straightforward subdivision. Prepared remarks to add to it.
Just want to point out where it is.
There it is.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to be heard with respect to this application? Please state your name and address. If you can keep it under 3 minutes, that would be appreciated.
This should be short, a little longer than
Sorry.
than Ms. Laguerre, but my name's Diane Leverrier. I'm an attorney with Jordan Leverrier PC, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 79 Middle Highway LLC. I would repeat what Ms. Laguerre said. I would just add a couple of details with regard to this application. It is a straightforward subdivision application. 2-lot subdivision. There's one lot which abuts Middle Highway, which already has an existing conforming single-family residence. The proposed second lot conforms with the minimum lot area requirements, and the proposed clearing that's listed on the subdivision map that's been provided to you, and also has been approved by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services as well within the proposed clearing limits. The Lot 2 fronts Bow Oarsman's Road, and access to Lot 2 will be from, or is proposed to be from Bow Oarsman's Road. I know this came up in the past as an inquiry with regard to the application, so I just wanted to put that proposal out there. Again, the Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval has been granted by the Department of Health Services. It requires a connection of the 2 lots to a public water main. So a public water main will have to be installed before any building permits will be issued. And let's see, the proposed lot doesn't interfere with the natural topography of the land. The land is quite level in that area and with only about 0 to 15% slopes. And those are pretty much all of the details that I have with regards to the application. I think I'm under 3 minutes.
You are. I have full minute.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public in the room tonight who wish to be heard regarding this application? Matt, is there anyone on
Yes,
the
we
phone?
do.
Okay, I know that at least one of them is here on the Home Sweet Home, or is it
I think both of them.
both of them on Home Sweet Home?
Okay.
Open it up and ask, and let's ask if they're here on the public hearing.
Okay. I'm going to unmute last 4 digits, 8746. You are live.
Good
Phone
evening.
number. Hi, could you state your name, please?
The name is David Buda, B-U-D-A.
Okay, are you here on the Kathleen Dodge application?
Yes, because I'd like to ask one question for clarification, and I would just like to have the applicant's attorney just provide the additional information that I'm curious about. And the question is, since the Suffolk County Department of Health Services approval of the subdivision was conditioned upon the extension of a public water main, I would like someone to just explain how much of an extension and from where is that main currently, and where will it have to be extended to?
Well, it's not a question and answer session, but taking that as a public comment, we can include that in the record of public comments. Okay.
Well,
Anything
I think
else?
perhaps the applicant should be given the opportunity to answer, just so that it can be understood.
No, that's not how it works. Anything else? Any other comment?
Perhaps it should, Mr. Chairman.
Well, this is a public hearing, and if you have any other comment, you're free to give it, but that's that. Nothing else?
No, that was my one factual inquiry that I wanted an answer to, and unfortunately, you're not going to be able to provide it, even though I'm sure the applicant would be very happy to provide it.
All right, well, thank you. And actually, we give the applicant the opportunity to speak usually after the public speaks. So the applicant will have an opportunity, if the applicant wants, to respond to any public comments. Anything else?
That's great. Thank you.
You're under 3 minutes.
I just wanted to say good night.
Thank you. Good night. Matt, do we have anybody else?
0 additional callers. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, in keeping with our past practice, does the applicant wish to address any of the public comments that may have been made tonight?
I will do my best. I have a copy of I believe, the Department of Health Services approval here with showing the proposed water service extending over Bow Oarsman's Road and connecting. Yeah, it looks like it's connecting right along Bow Oarsman's Road.
Anything else?
That's it.
2.5 minutes left. Just so you know.
Do you have any other questions?
No, I did. Usually the applicant speaks after the public speaks, but we've now done that,
Okay.
and that's fine. Okay, Matt, if you have nobody else and we have nobody else in the audience, would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion that
Close
we
the-
close the meeting, the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second to close the meeting.
No, those people out there would object. I heard a second from Sharon. All
Yes.
those in favor of closing the
Aye.
public hearing? Any opposed? Public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, now we will move into the work session, and we will go with Home Sweet Home as the initial matter. We have Randy, you're on both of these for the board. Tina, I don't see Eric, so you're covering both?
Eric is not here this evening.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You're stuck with me. Congratulations.
We had, we received a letter from Mr. Matthews wanting to, is he on there? I
On the
can't see
Zoom
the
call, I
picture.
think.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, your electronic back is to us right now. So, all right, maybe we can get,
I don't know if I know how to do that.
you don't know how to do the split screen thing? All right, well,
I don't know if I can bring him over there.
okay, all right, don't worry about it.
That's more important than seeing it.
Yeah.
I want to hear what he
Tell
has
him
to
that.
say. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Good evening, everyone. This is the Home Sweet Home Site Plan Special Permit application. The application is made to convert a legally pre-existing, non-conforming to various dimensional regulations, commercial warehouse into a self-storage facility. The application is proposing to increase gross floor area from the existing 1,810 square feet to over 55,000 square feet. And the applicant's also proposing renovations to the existing parking areas for additional parking and circulation and landscaping. The parcel is in Wayne Scott, located on Montauk Highway, and is zoned CI. The total storage units currently proposed is 443. So I have the latest site plan up. It's small. I'll try to build it up a little bit, but hopefully you can see it. So regarding the project scope, this is the 6th review of this project by the planning board, the first one I'm participating in. After reviewing the file and speaking with Eric and watching some of the past meetings, after the last review, the board requested the applicant to create a more conforming parking area by removing Building A, which is currently a little bit over 3,060 square feet. It's right here. If you can see my arrow, this is Building A. In response, the applicant in the most recent set of plans has proposed reductions to building area on the property in 2 locations. One is a small area of Building A by approximately 595 square feet. And the other is kind of linear portion of Building C, and that's an approximate 301 square foot reduction. So that totals about 896 square feet, or approximately 29% of what the board asked to be removed at the last meeting. So the planning department's recommending the board discuss if this removal is acceptable to achieve the stated goals of the intent of moving the building, which was enhanced site circulation and the provision of adequate parking. Because this has been continually discussed over the past several meetings, if the scope is currently proposed does not meet with the board's expectations, we recommend that there's some specific actions that be discussed in order to resolve the departure of what the applicant's proposing and what the planning board would like to see from the application. At the last meeting, the board also requested some clarification with regard to how disposal of abandoned items would be handled. I didn't see this responded to in the most recent submission, so I brought that up again. Next, regarding parking, one of the major constraints about this site, obviously, you've got a very large non-conforming building. There's really minimal on-site space to accommodate parking for a self-service storage facility. Currently the site, remember, operates as a commercial warehouse, so it's utilized by employees. With the conversion to self-storage, it is a place where members of the public will visit and be accessing on a continual basis. So it's a bit of a different operation that's being proposed from what exists there. Regarding parking, there is no town code self-storage parking requirement. The applicant has proposed 14 spaces, and they're placed throughout the site. There's several in front area, fronting Montauk Highway, including an ADA space. There's some parking behind building area D, employee spaces, and there's additional parking in the rear of the facility. The planning department does note that the front parking spaces have been reconfigured, and now the circulation requirements of the code are met. Whereas they were not in the last submission that the board looked at. The spaces are angled at a 60-degree angle toward Montauk Highway, which means you're going to have lights flashing right onto the highway. And it'd be difficult to shield due to space constraints of the applicant's current proposal with any landscaping or other buffers. The planning department has said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Our position is that the provided parking is insufficient relative to other similar uses in the town. And it would be difficult to redesign without additional space on the site. The parking lot, of course, is pre-existing to zoning, but we want to point out that this application does need a special permit, and the special permit standards do have requirements with respect to parking. I put in the memo. The planning board needs to find that the parking is adequate for the anticipated number of occupants of the proposed use, and that it's convenient and conducive to safe operations on the site. Again, this is a comment that's been made several times. So if this is something that cannot be agreed upon in terms of how to move forward, we should have some specific guidelines that that move this to a place where there's more congruence between the parties. Regarding the traffic study, there was no traffic study resubmitted with this most recent submission, but I did italicize and take the comments that were made by the planning department during the last review, which did not seem to be expressly responded to in this submission. Some of the highlights of those comments were concerns regarding the seasonality of our town and what that could mean for a facility such as this. I think a lot of kind of traditional traffic manuals maybe don't include seasonality as well as we see it out here, where we literally get, 3 times the population or 2 times the population in the town. So that's something that I'm not sure has been addressed in ways that everyone's comfortable with to this point. The prior traffic review mentions safety concerns regarding the turning radius, like trucks backing out of these truck parking area, kind of like right in the middle of the site here. The ADA space is right here, so this could be a dangerous situation was something that was mentioned. What did get submitted this time was a letter from the applicant's consultant, BHB, that had affirmed their previous findings that with the revised proposal, an additional circulation and parking, that their recommendation was that it was adequate. Board should discuss if they agree. Regarding sanitary systems and drainage, the applicant has proposed an IA system. And in previous reviews, it was noted that the Georgica Drive was prone to flooding. In the most recent submission, the applicant has provided for a series of dry wells throughout the site, which are not on this plan, but one of the later plans. So that has been addressed. The plans need to be amended just to affirm compliance with the town code requirements. Regarding dimensional conformance of the property, this has been discussed before, but we did want to just highlight that there are new accessory structures proposed, outdoor stairways, and a new trash enclosure. So there's stairways here and here, one in the rear of the property. We need to have dimensions on site plans for these to confirm where they're going to need dimensional variances from the board if the board chooses to grant those. Regarding site lighting, we reviewed the lighting plan and it is compliant with the planning board guidelines, and we just confirmed what was compliant there. Regarding landscaping, we're noting that due to the high building coverage and the constrained nature of the site, there's minimal landscaping proposed. There's no space for it. But in the interest of maintaining the aesthetic quality of the town, we do ask that utilization of vegetation to buffer views is maximized as possible. So we ask the applicant to review if there's additional opportunities that could screen parking and building views from Montauk Highway. Recognizing with this existing configuration, the opportunities are limited on site because the constrained nature of the site. The DOT right-of-way is fronting the property. Probably it is difficult to plant there, but there's no reason that the applicant couldn't request the DOT to help them screen the site. And we also just want to note that the special permit criteria also has buffering and screening criteria that the board has to find is met, including adequate buffer yards, and screening can and will be provided to protect adjacent properties and land uses from detrimental impacts. We've not received comments from the fire marshal on this most recent review, but they had already said it was sufficient for purposes, so I'm sure they're reviewing this and we'll get those soon. So to conclude, the application is mostly complete. However, the large scale proposed on the heavily constrained pre-existing non-conforming lot has been the theme of several planning board discussions with little change in the proposal. The large size of the building precludes adequate setbacks, landscaping, buffers, and parking that the town typically requires and is experienced for, applications of this nature and size. The board is requested to review and relax setbacks for the property, in addition to kind of relaxing those other standards. And because the project requires a special permit, the planning board will need to determine that the criteria for that special permit is met. So They should discuss if the self-storage facility is appropriate for its location and if the application is ready for a public hearing. Thank you.
Very good. Now, can you fix the camera screen?
So
so
to
that
get
we
him
can
on there,
See our applicant.
I don't know if LTV can help me with that. Matt, are you there?
Can we get the applicant's?
He should
Matt?
be on right now.
Yeah.
So, because he's on the TV that the board cannot see. Hold on,
There we are.
There we go.
There I am.
And two of them.
sorry.
At least one too many. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Brian Matthews, Kirsten Cooley here on behalf of Home Sweet Home. I believe here with us today, either in the audience or on Zoom, is our engineer, Mark Perlotta, our traffic engineer, Aaron MacDay, and our architect, Joe Neitzel. So some of them I think are appearing by Zoom as I was, and I thank the board for that accommodation for today. I also want to thank Tina for a very thorough memo. I'm sure it's a difficult project to jump into after, we've been at it for so much time. But before I address certain points, there is one overriding issue that repeats itself throughout that planning memo, and it was a statement made in the conclusion, and one that was just repeated then, that there was just a moment ago, that there is a quote theme throughout this matter that the applicant has made very little changes from the time it was initially proposed. And I have to say respectfully but unequivocally that statement is simply untrue in every respect. Throughout the course of the review of this application, the applicant has cut back on the proposed gross total square footage of the building, significantly reduced the number of proposed storage units, nearly doubled the amount of parking proposed from the initial application, and has now proposed to cut nearly 900 square feet off of legally existing buildings to increase the potential parking and to improve circulation. So I think it's respectfully unfair and inaccurate to say that the applicant has shown very little change. Instead, the record shows that at every turn, following every work session and following every single planning follow-up memo, the applicant has provided the information and has made changes to a large degree, made the changes that were requested by the board. In this regard, with respect to the last set of changes, and I believe it was noted in Tina's memo, that while the board had initially asked that the entire office building, which is building A, be removed, or at least a real substantial portion of that building be removed, the applicant has proposed to remove nearly 600 square feet of that building alone, with an additional 300 square feet of the building to the west. As our engineers and architects can speak to, removing more of that building would do nothing to improve site circulation. It would do nothing to add additional parking due to location of the required truck loading spaces. It would essentially be dead space. So all of that needed to be said, I think, from the outset. In fairness to the applicant, as again, they've done what's been asked of them, and the fact remains that they are cutting back the mass of a building that's existed for decades. They're making this existing building nicer, and they're making the use of this property less impactful. So having said all that, I want to turn to some of the other specific items that were raised by the planning department in their memo. And for me, I always find it most helpful to do that to address the questions that are raised at the end. So first, as it relates to question 1, and the question of whether or not the board finds the parking circulation to be acceptable. I would submit that respectfully, this is not a discretionary finding for this board to make. The code dictates what's acceptable from the parking layout and the circulation. And here, the spots themselves at 60 degrees are required to be 10 feet by 8 feet, 10 feet by 18 feet. These spaces meet that requirement. It requires a parking aisle width of 18 feet. Here whereas the parking lot was previously pre-existing non-conforming for significantly less than that, what is proposed now is an aisle width of 19.8 feet, which exceeds what the code requires. So the fact that we meet or exceed what the code requires mandates a finding that the parking layout and circulation is acceptable. Second, as it relates to questions 3 and 4, about whether a number of parking spaces are adequate and whether the applicant has addressed the issue of seasonality. Once again, I understand that Tina was jumping into this and it was a lot to respond to. Planning memo states that the issue of parking has been raised before, but incorrectly claims, I think on page 3 of that memo, that, quote, the applicant has not responded. Again, that's just simply incorrect. Far from not responding, the applicant retained a parking and traffic expert, VHB Engineering, who have submitted multiple expert reports to show that, first, the number of spaces is more than adequate. And I think when we first submitted, we were around 7 spaces, whereas the current plan has 15 spaces, inclusive of the ADA space and the truck loading spaces. They've also concluded that the self-storage use is basically the most passive use that there is, and that will not have any adverse impact on traffic. And third, has specifically addressed the issue of seasonality and concluded that, quote, the impacts of seasonality on traffic volumes, while noteworthy, would not stand to change the traffic generated by the proposed use, end quote. So again, far from not responding, as the memo states, the applicant has responded in detail to each of these issues and has submitted multiple expert reports using in-field studies and accepted principles and methodologies, each of which have concluded that the proposed project will not have any adverse impact and will in fact improve the traffic and circulation over what currently exists and should be approved. Then, question 4 kind of then goes further to ask whether or not the board, quote, agrees with the applicant's consultant on its seasonality conclusions. Again, the board's been presented with multiple expert reports showing that parking is sufficient and there will be no seasonal impact. The board has nothing in its possession, and there's nothing in the record that refutes this expert data-driven conclusion. As a matter of law, neither the planning department nor the board has the ability to respectfully, in essence, just throw up their hands and say, well, we disagree. Any alleged disagreement is not based on any empirical or qualitative data. It is by definition then arbitrary and wouldn't withstand any review. So that's the principal question. Then turning to the remaining items, they're obviously of lesser importance, but I want to make sure we check them off. The issue of auctions or abandoned items, I think we addressed it, but we can just be very clear. Auctions are done online. They're very rare. And if people want to pick things up, they have to then make an appointment to do that. We weren't sure what was meant by abandoned to the extent it meant something beyond something to be auctioned off. If it's something just left outside a unit, well, the property manager there's the dumpsters there for that reason, and they'll get rid of it and keep the property looking nice. We would ask the board to waive the setbacks for the rear stairs and the trash enclosure, as is common practice, particularly since these features are not visible really and have absolutely no impact. We agree and thank the department for recognizing that the lighting plan is acceptable. On the issue of vegetation, we're okay with adding whatever vegetation or screening, for the purpose of screening headlights that the board or the department feels is appropriate. There is some space to do that for those front spaces. If you look, now that they're angled at that 60%, there's that kind of little triangular spaces in front where some kind of vegetation can be planted to shield those lights to the extent that they're an issue or a concern. But, otherwise, I think we also need to keep in mind, as I know really everybody knows just from experience, that these special permit standards that are embedded in the town code, they're the same for this type of use as they are for natural resources special permit. And so while buffering and screening has its place, and we're happy to do whatever we can do, it's less of an issue here when you're talking about an existing building on a commercial industrial zone property adjacent to a former sand mine and a gas station on Montauk Highway. So, whatever we can do, we're going to do. But I think that issue of buffering and screening is really less of an issue here than it would be in other different type of circumstance. So, having said that, we've been in front of the board since we submitted in April of 2020 and June of 2020 we first were on. And, we all know that time got lost during the lost year of 2020 and then a little bit more. But I think the record does bear out that we've made every effort to address the concerns raised by the board and the planning department. And so, I know we were here before previously, saying, it's time to get to the public hearing. We still believe that, but we also have a recognition that the last time we were in front of the board, I think was July of 22. And it took a while to really get the application to where we were, what parts of the building and how much we're going to be cut off. So there is an understanding that it's been a little bit of time and maybe lost a little bit of momentum in the discussions we were having. So while we'd like to get to the public hearing, I don't know, if the board has any hesitancy to that tonight, we're certainly, we want to make sure we're addressing your concerns, and, we'd like to get there, very soon, but we understand that maybe is not something that we should rush to today if the board has any hesitancy. But I think the undeniable fact remains that everything that the client is proposing here is making this property nicer and making this property less impactful than it is now. That's what the reports bear out. There's nothing else in the record, no reports in the record that refute any of that. And so unless they're, I'd love to, if there are any other members of the team who you'd like to hear from, or if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to do all we can to start answering them.
Very well. Okay. Randy?
I went out there today and I looked at the site, and there was a fair amount of activity on that right away on the north side. I went in that way, and there was large pickup trucks going in and out.
They weren't going in and out
On
of
Bathgate. On Bathgate, you mean, right?
On Bathgate?
No, they're, around the north side of
Behind the building.
going over to the back entrance to the other businesses there.
Okay, but you're not talking about going in and out of the Wayne Scott Commercial Center site?
No, these were people going to those other buildings that benefit from the access easement in the north.
Okay.
So the commercial center's there, and these buildings, so there's an alleyway between them.
There's a photograph
There's an alley.
overhead. Thank you.
Alleyway between them.
Once again, the applicant is proposing to double the gross floor area and change the use. We've discussed this, a self-storage facility that the coming and going of clients, unlike a moving and storage company, is only regulated by the hours that they're open. We have 443 storage units, and what we're calling 14 or 15 spaces, but that includes the ADA space, 3 truck spaces.
Yeah.
And the spaces at the back on the northern side, I believe still use the access easement for their aisles.
No, they're not aisles.
No. Well, the ones, in other words, we have what we're calling 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I see 10 spaces, an ADA space, and then 3 truck loading spaces. So if 2% of the 443 storage unit customers, 2% were to come at the same time, it would require 9 spaces. What happens if 5% on a July afternoon, what happens if 5% of the 443? I have to agree with the planning department that there's not enough parking here, and it's less than we've required at other similar sites. I appreciate that the applicants did come back and agree to remove part of the building. I think that was a major concession, and I also understand the Mr. Matthews' statement that removing the rest of that Area A building would not necessarily provide for additional parking. But one thing it would do is it would reduce the number of storage units that are going to be served by this facility, which goes to the parking problem in a different way. There's less demand, there's less units, there's less demand, there's less demand on parking. There's less problems with circulation, with traffic. I think those truck spaces too, I drove into the truck space. I imagine if there's a truck in there that's trying to back out, it's going to basically interrupt the flow of any traffic in that facility, as long as it's blocking the circulation. Am I correct that are we now only talking about access from Montauk Highway? Or is there access onto Georgica Drive as well?
Are you asking me? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
No, right now there's still the access onto Georgica as well. That's still an open access point.
Okay.
Well, when you
There's
say an
parking
open
spots back
access
there,
point, to what point in the building is it an access? Is it to the back entrance? It's not to the front, because you can't go in reverse. It's traffic.
You're
Leaving the parking.
about the front parking lot. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
It has right now the latest plan. If you look at the last plans from Key Civil Engineering, but just right on the front page there, and it shows that it would be ingress and egress from Montauk Highway, and then only egress onto Georgica.
Because of the way those parking spaces are angled.
Incorrect.
That's incorrect?
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Is it correctly
Matthew,
what
Mark
Mr. Matthews
Pilata.
is saying?
I'm sorry, Mark, go right
The
ahead.
engineer with this.
No. I mean.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Your name. We need
there's no access.
Your name.
I'm sorry, Mark Pilata, Key Civil Engineering, civil engineer for the applicant. Right now, there's no access from Georgica. It is only an exit. There's an ingress and egress from Montauk Highway, and the parking stalls are angled such that when they exit the facility, they will be exiting out onto Georgica, hence the angle.
Okay.
So that was done one iteration or two iterations ago to pull the exit at the time. Right now it exists is very close to the intersection. So there was some concern from the board. So by putting the parking up against Montauk Highway, we were able to pull that away. And I think that was a benefit.
That's an improvement.
I'd like to, if maybe I walk through some of the changes that occurred for the board, and maybe that'll help you refresh your memory.
Yeah. I think you've improved it. I'd like to hear, I still frankly seeing two-way traffic off of Montauk Highway, the truck loading, possibly backing up. In my mind, it only barely works if the absolute minimum of the clients in this facility show up. Once more than the absolute minimum show up, I don't think it works.
Yeah, if 100% show up, it won't work.
It won't.
Right? But that's just, I get where you're coming from. You're
At
trying
what
to use,
percentage does it not?
well, that's what my colleague from VHB is going to talk to. And
Okay.
the studies that he uses, using Institute transportation standards, we know historically what comes here into these types of facilities. I would also remind that this board has approved 3 applications: Twin Forks, Hardscrabble Court, and Good Friend Drive. I don't know if you.
None of which are on Route 27.
None of which are on Route 27, but Good Friend Drive had one stall per 4,650 square feet. Hard Scrabble had one stall per 7,750 square feet. And Twin Forks had one stall per 6,092 square feet.
How many?
This is one per.
How many storage
Yeah,
units?
that's the question.
Though that I don't have that
That's,
information.
you see, that's the significant thing. You built this mezzanine, you added a couple of hundred or however many units by building the mezzanine. You got a building that starts out as maybe the third or fourth largest square footage building in the town. It's comparing it to a 4,000 or 7,000 square foot building, particularly one on any road really, other than 27. Other than 27 in Waynescott, is not, I don't think it's a valid comparison. I also think that you've got a significant issue here in that when you really look at it, you've got three spots in the front, the three on the angle. Okay, now granted you have those three long bays where the trucks go now when it was a moving company. But as a realistic matter, those three spots are the three spots that people are going to use. They're going to come and go, and they're going to, that building being as large as it is, has a few spaces in the back, most of which I think, or a good number of which anyway, are going to be used by staff from the business. So anyone who parks in back has to walk all the way around to the front of the building on 27. As I see it, those three spots, those three angled spots, is it three or four? Four. Okay, four. Four angled spots on the bottom. That's the parking. All right. You can point to the parking where the trucks currently come and go, but I don't know that that's going to be very accessible and used as nearly as much.
And the loading dock into the building is at the top of the truck spaces.
Okay, yes, thank you. So effectively, if somebody brings a box truck in, you've lost at least one and more likely two spaces in that area right away. So, I understand what you're saying, that if you count up the spots in the back and if you, include those spots where the loading dock is, yeah, okay. We've got, I don't know how many, 13, 14, whatever it is, spots. 19. But the point is that the business is going to come and go, the business of the company is going to come and go through those four spots in the front. And nobody really knows when it's a self-storage business. The whole point is it's driven by the customers. When they want to be there, they're there. When they don't want to be there, they're not. The only thing that governs when they come and go is when the business is open. And it's on 27. And it backs up, and anyone going into those spots or waiting for the spots is going to back up onto 27. And I understand that the expert has said, and council just repeated, that there's no seasonality, or the seasonality isn't an issue. I don't know where they base that on. I really don't. This is a self-storage company in a community where the population between Memorial Day and Labor Day quadruples, whatever it does. It goes from 18,000 people to 75,000 people. And some of those 75,000 people are very likely keeping their chaise lounges in their storage spaces in this facility. And I would think that a couple of weekends during the summer, they're going to all go and get those chaise lounges and pick them up and bring them out to their houses in Amagansett or Waynescott or the Springs or wherever they might live. And they're going to line up to park in those four spaces on 27. And they're going to line up out the driveway and down 27 on the most crowded road in this town. So I understand that's what the expert's saying. I understand that that's what council's arguing, but I think it flies in the face of reality. That's the way I see it.
Let me ask you a question. If you were renting a unit from here and that unit was on the north side of the building, and you use the unit, you come by every few months or whatever to get records out of you, where are you going to park when you go there?
If I'm on the north side and you have an entrance there, there's a strong likelihood that, assuming that the internal circulation of the building and the location of the elevators in the building and the ramping of the building, and depending on how heavy and large it is, and depending upon the vehicle that I'm using, I might park in back. But I don't think it's realistic to assume that there's going to be equal distribution of parking all around the building.
Or they park at the gas station right across.
Well, that'll good luck, because then you'll have a real problem.
Yeah, I doubt any. I mean, as Long Islanders, it's been my experience. Everyone parks as close to the entrance as they can get.
Yeah.
And if they know that they have to walk through the building to get to their locker, they're not going to do it. That was my point. If you're familiar with this facility, if you are renting, you as a customer, you're going to know where to go. The second thing is, if you're renting up towards the front, let's say, same situation, you're going to go get your box. You're probably going to park in that loading dock because you know it's the easiest.
Right.
Assuming there's no truck already in there from somebody loading and unloading.
Well, fair enough, right? That happens wherever we go. You go to the supermarket, if there's somebody in the front stall, you go to the next nearest. So I guess I'm submitting to you that someone familiar with the facility, I'm submitting to you that maybe the four stalls, there's actually 5 if you count the one on the east side there, perhaps will not be being as used as much as you think for people who are familiar with the facility. Someone coming to the facility saying, I want to rent, I've never been here before.
They're definitely in the front.
They're definitely going to use those because they probably don't, oh, that's a loading stall. Maybe I shouldn't park there, right? So I get that. I will let my colleague from VHB talk to the empirical data that he submits in terms of the studies and the transportation and everything. And perhaps maybe that's where we need to go next. But I don't know. Do you want me to walk you through the changes that were made? Previously, there was major concern, from my recollection. I was here back in July, and there was concern about circulation and dimensional requirements. Could I ask that there was a colored site plan that was submitted as an exhibit?
That's the last slide. Yeah.
Okay. This I like this exhibit. It's a little easier to read. It's not as hard on the eyes. Obviously the red portion is the building. If you look up at the front there are hatched red areas. Those are the areas that are being removed. That allowed for a few things. It provided to meet the dimensional setback backup of the code. It allowed another stall to be put here, and previously we had been using, we had the ADA stall with its stripe, and then we had another striped area that in the video that we submitted with the box truck doing the maneuvering was utilizing
And we
that.
saw that.
So this time we've expanded that as well, even though we don't think it's absolutely necessary. It's there for perhaps the novice truck driver.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
If more of area A was removed, why couldn't you just continue doing spaces like the one you have going north?
Okay. So these are required by code, these loading stalls. So we lose those because that would be required to back up into them. So we didn't see that as a benefit. So we took this away. We met all the dimensional, which, I mean, I thought the video, demonstrated that a pretty big box truck, could maneuver pretty easily. I think it was taken out of context. They were like, oh, look, he's going over there. The purpose of the video was just to show, look, you can turn this truck in there and do that,
If you reduced area C further to the north, you could duplicate the parking that you have there, right? Could put more parking in there.
Where, Randy?
If they took area C further north.
Oh, you mean cut off that right there?
Yeah.
Right where the cursor
And
is.
are you
I mean, I think it's our opinion, and we've proven, I mean, Aaron, you want to step in here and talk to some of the data that was submitted?
Hello?
Yep. Sorry, just unmuting. Yeah, listen, I've done many parking and traffic studies for self-storage facilities in many different parts of the island that are far more dense than out here, even during the summer. And the reality is that the traffic that's generated by these facilities is not very high at any given time. And the parking demand at any given time. You know, it was mentioned that even if only a small percentage of the units are accessed all at once, the parking would be overwhelmed. But the reality is that an even smaller percentage is ever accessed at any given time. You know, I in terms of just understanding that you know this potential that it exists, that everyone's going to come in all this one day. I mean, if someone can point out another location to study that may exhibit that, I'd be happy to do so and to show that. And I'm very, very confident that, you know, empirically that would show that it doesn't necessarily happen for these types of storage facilities. But the reality is, you know, the 14 parking stalls or the 15 stalls that Mr. Matthews mentioned, that would be adequate for far more units than we're proposing, just based on the way that these things operate. And that's based on, you know, that's based on data that's collected at facilities like this over and over again. So
I'm curious, just what other facilities on Long Island are you thinking of? If you don't, I mean, I don't want to, you know.
I'm not sure what, I mean, I'm thinking, well.
Are you talking Smithtown, Huntington?
The town of Huntington.
I mean, you know, I mean, give me a sense.
Brookhaven, the town of North Hempstead, the town of Hempstead, the city of Glen Cove as of yesterday. And again, all of those locations in terms of the population density, I think, again, even during the summer when we say that there's this, let's call it a deluge where more people come out, those areas still have a higher density of population. These facilities that I'm talking about are generally larger than the one that we're proposing. And I've never seen the parking overwhelmed such that there's more than a handful of vehicles for the number of storage units. So
on state highways like this?
On state highways, on side roads, on county highways, you know, off the beaten path, all over the place. There's, you know, again, on a square foot basis, this type of land use is as minimally invasive in terms of the amount of traffic and parking that's generated in basically every possible circumstance of any land use that I could propose. So, you know, that's what the data says. That's what empirical data that's collected at these facilities on Long Island says. That's what data from the IT land use codes, which is just kind of the Bible that we refer to, you know, no matter where you go, that's what it says.
All right, thank you. Randy's, you know,
All right, well, you
discussion. So
I go through the rest. I still think that the spaces on the north don't meet our code for parking spaces in terms of aisles, and so I'm not sure why we're counting them as parking spaces. Those three. Yeah. What about the ones around the side though?
These?
Yeah.
They're 10 by 18.
And then the aisle width to turn around?
20 feet.
There is,
you go into the easement, right?
there's 17 feet from the back of the stall to the property line. And then the easement is 20 feet. I mean, this is essentially, it's a driveway.
Right. The easement, yeah, it's not an aisle with but the easement itself is 20 feet wide.
But don't we require, I may be off, 24 feet?
That's when it's Yeah,
With the
two-way,
aisle.
I'd have to check.
I believe that's right.
You have more than that. So here, from here to the property, you have 31 feet, then you have 20 feet of the
Yeah, but
access.
that's not available for you.
How is
to
this
use.
any different than in a shopping center? If this was a drive aisle that was, you have parking.
Because other landowners benefit from that easement. It's not exclusively,
But we have rights to it.
you have rights.
But
to own
we're
it.
not talking about parking on it. You're just pulling in and off it, and that's exactly what it's there for access to your property.
Well, I'm saying that you don't meet our code for what a parking space is.
I disagree. I think, but
31
Mark, you can
feet
address that.
From here to
What
here.
about that one?
This side here,
Yeah,
it's 13 feet.
13 feet. I don't think that meets code. And you're using
But
the common easement, the common driveway easement for your aisle. So I don't think that's a space. I don't think that counts as a space.
I don't know that that's an accurate statement, but we can flush that out more, certainly.
Randy.
These ones I think are compliant, right?
No,
Either it is or it isn't.
Okay, so
So there's no point in
we'll
having an academic, if it isn't, it isn't. But.
I just wanted, I guess what my point is that if we use our normal code standards for parking spaces, do these meet the standard that the spaces that you're calling parking spaces, do they meet our code standard for what a parking space is, including an aisle to turn around, not using a common driveway easement? It goes to the problem here, which is that there's too much on too small a lot in general. But, okay, so then there's a point about Georgica Drive, prone to flooding. So we need to have that updated, right? You have added dry wells to.
Yes, we've submitted drainage and engineering plans showing that we're essentially retaining. And I know we had this discussion before, but it's been a while since we've been in front, so it's fairness to the board to rehash. That's okay, but we've submitted drainage and engineering plans showing that we meet all the requirements, that we're effectively retaining all of our own water. And as we've talked about before, the drainage problem on Georgia is a long-standing problem. It's not our client's obligation to fix that problem. It's the client's obligation not to exacerbate that problem, and that's what we've done.
But
to the extent that anything needs to be more on Georgia, that's a municipal solution that.
Well, how do you intend to deal with that? The fact that when there's a reasonably heavy rain, it blocks access to the north side of your property.
If I may, I was out there and to take a look at the concern, and I was actually surprised to find there's quite a bit of drainage within the town right of way. And I suspect that if someone cleaned that, it would work properly.
That's a good point, to clean it. I can tell you,
I thought perhaps it was undersized. That's what I thought I was going to find when I went out there. And there are a number, there was at least 4 or 5 dry wells there. And I was like, oh, it looks like somebody tried to fix this. And I was surprised. And I suspect that there's probably needs to just some debris.
What do you want to do with that?
No,
Should we have the highway highway superintendent take a look? Because I've been out there after a rain and there's, I would say, 8 inches of water.
I suspect a lot of silt has run off from the trucks that go there.
Probably a good idea to find out how bad it is, because I'm down that road, almost daily, and I live right near it. So it's always clogged up.
As a professional engineer, I'm telling you, I went there, I looked at it, no charge. I won't send you an invoice for this. It looked just my conjecture was like, oh, look, there's quite a bit here. Why isn't this working is the next question. And without doing any further investigation, I would suspect it's just based on my experience.
All of these things contribute to a concern that.
Which is only.
I would also submit that our plan that we've submitted that totally takes care of our own stormwater runoff will help the situation should it appear some of the roof drains perhaps discharge to the side street. So,
Okay.
Let's try and move this along because we do have another applicant and it's getting late. So.
Well, we can go to the questions at the end, see where the board's
let's
at.
see what else the board has.
No, I mean, the only thing I wanted to say is I think, you know, I think the only reason why we're concerned about, I think point taken that it's probably a low traffic type of facility. I think I believe that. But we do have the situation where cars are coming in and out of a very busy trafficy road. So I think that's why we're so hung up on it, you know, as a board. And so, you know, I think that's really the big takeaway here. I think you really want to make sure that cars aren't back on 27 trying to get in.
Or trucks.
Yeah, I mean, probably the facilities are pretty small at 400 square feet, so I'm not envisioning a lot of truck traffic. But I mean, I think that's why we're concerned is really just that most people will try to go to the front, and it's sitting on a very trafficy road. That's all. I mean, what the solution is.
Yeah, I appreciate the applicant making all the changes that you've made throughout time. And I kind of, understand Matt's point that you have, in fact, made substantial reductions and changes from the original plan. But to me, that indicates that the original plan was huge to begin with. So it's indicative of that more than it is on mitigating the problem. And it's still large. I mean, if you look at the picture there, that's all you need to do is that it's this monstrosity of coverage on almost every square inch of that property. And as far as the parking is concerned, that's where I have a little bit of conundrum because we do have an expert who says that based on other properties similar to this one with this type of use, the parking is sufficient. But just from a layman's viewpoint and knowing the area, like Sharon says on 27, it just doesn't, it's not convincing that it is sufficient. The drainage, the parking, maneuverability, these still loom large to me as problems. And again, I appreciate the efforts that have been made by the applicant to reduce the size and try to answer these issues. But I'm sorry, when I look at it, I still think that there are problems there.
Luke, can I just say that Tina's memo says the planning department maintains that the provided parking is insufficient relative to other similar uses approved in the town.
One of the problems that we have, and I know I've said this before about this application and other self-storage applications, is that there's nothing in the town code that says how a self-storage facility is supposed to be, what the standards are. And so, I think I've used the analogy before. It's like trying to build the airplane while you're flying. And that's what we're doing here. So, that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't think that the analogies to other self-storage facilities in town are really that valid. But, so the problem is that in each instance, we have to rely on the planning department's analysis of the facility, of the site location and the traffic, because, we have to make a sui generis decision each time. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to put the board's mind at ease, I was sort of I was showing you the precedent of what the board has approved previously with the Twin Forks and that it's almost double what we're proposing per ratio. And I believe the planning memo talked about the town of Southampton and the town of Brookhaven at 1 per 200. So if you go to the town of Brookhaven, they require 1 per 2,000. I'm sorry, I said 1 per 2,000 square feet of area, which I've done a number of applications in the town of Brookhaven, and we typically, if we show the parking, if we meet the parking, they tell us, don't do those stalls. We know you're not going to use them. Make it landscaped. I would also point out that a lot of towns are updating their codes to be more in tune with the times of these types of facilities. Oyster Bay just changed their standard to 1 per 4,000. Town of Islip is 1 per 5,000. And I'm doing a facility in Riverhead that is 1 per 10,000. They also make you count the office. So if you have 1,000 square foot office, they do 1 per 200 or 1 per 250. So they make you put in a few for the office. So I listen, I understand from the layman perspective, and Lou's kind of like, well, I have an expert telling me this. And I get the conundrum. Intuitively, you're saying it, but.
And also, but also, they're all lovely towns, but they're not resort towns where. And
but to Aaron's point, they're higher. I mean, Aaron was with me last night in the city of Glen Cove. We're doing a facility, 3 stories, 244,000 square feet of self-storage. And we have, I think, 35 stalls. And we needed a variance. City of Glen Cove ruled that the code requirement, because their code actually doesn't have a criteria for self-storage, and the planning board ruled that it'd be 1 per 4,000, which still forced us to go for a variance. I think we needed whatever that comes out to be 60 some odd stalls, and we went and got the variance because we were able to prove, because we know that that's the way these things work. We don't generate a high. I think Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, what's the peak? I think it was 7 stalls, the peak anticipated? Number of vehicles?
Hang on a second, because I don't have that section open. I think it was 7, though.
Yeah, no, I want to let my, you know what, you can hold off on that because I have one more, and that was my bad. I'm sorry. Michael, go ahead.
I share Sharon's concern about the parking, rather the traffic. And you have Montauk Highway, but you have Georgica, because you have a gas station right across the street that gets a lot of traffic. You get the concrete mixing not dump.
Bad word.
Plant that has big trucks. In fact, I live about a quarter mile from this spot, so I might be there.
You're closer than I am.
Closer than Sam is. And you have Bathgate that gets a lot of landscaping trucks, and because there's a deli behind there, right? So there's a lot of. I question your traffic study, and I remember that it was like you did 4 hours on a Wednesday, and that was your whole traffic study, if I remember correctly, something like that. And I'm like, that just is not convincing to me for a traffic study. That is insufficient for this area.
It's according to Tina's memo, it was the traffic study is based on New York State Department of Transportation counting station located on Sunrise Highway in Shinnecock Hills.
In Southampton.
What?
So,
No,
just
so
And it's from 2019.
that's something else.
if I may, so
Yeah,
the data that you're referring to from the Shinnecock, that's to sort of demonstrate the amount of traffic that's heading out to the east end. That's a continuous count station, which is monitoring traffic for planning purposes, such as the ones that you oversee constantly. And that's what the data says. It concluded in the terms of seasonality that there's about a 10% increase in traffic on an hourly basis going out to this area of Long Island.
Is it typical
in terms of
specific traffic studies to use a count so far away?
A continuous count station, absolutely, because that's the reason why that's the reason why they're that's the closest one on the South Fork of Long Island.
Why can't we count right here?
Well, we can count right here, but more to the point, you mentioned that the 4 hours that we counted. The reason for that count and the thrust of the original traffic study was to characterize while it was still open. I'm not 100% sure if they're still operating the existing moving company, to characterize the volume of traffic generated by that use in order to compare it to what the volume of traffic generated by this use will be. It wasn't necessarily to look at the operation of Montauk Highway or Bathgate Drive or Georgia Drive. We did get that information in terms of some way, and I can tell you that, again, I do a lot of this work in many more dense areas and see a lot more congestion, especially on the side streets in a lot of different areas. But again, the purpose of the count was to characterize the peak hour traffic for the existing use to compare to the proposed.
Well,
There was no reason to do any more data collection. There was no reason to do any less. Just based on even regardless of what
to see, in other words, what the impact, the change would be between
Yeah.
what you're using, what's going on there. Well,
But
right now
even
it's not operating at all.
even
But what
even
was
even
going
in,
on there?
but even empirically, even if we assumed that the existing use at the time that we did the study was derelict, it was not operating, the amount of traffic generated by this use, it amounts to something like one new vehicle every 4 minutes. I challenge anyone to sit at the corner of an intersection, as I have, as I'm learning this trade, and observe traffic and notice the difference between one additional vehicle every 4 minutes. Virtually impossible. That amount of traffic cannot have, just by virtue of how much it is, cannot have an impact on operating conditions. I absolutely understand. I've done work out in this area. I definitely understand that at certain times of the year, especially on Montauk Highway, which is really the only arterial that serves this area, that there can be congestion. I understand that. This application, based on everything that I have, that all the data I have, all of my experience, will not exacerbate that, will not change that, and that's generally it.
All right. Let me, Ed,
Yes.
can you bring up,
Yeah. So I do have a few additional comments, but I
do need to wrap this up, so.
all right. I'm not going to be long. I promise.
No, not your fault, man.
All right. I'm gonna do my thing here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say, look, I totally understand the applicant's desire to optimize the opportunity here, right? And, you've been blessed with one of the largest commercial structures on the East End. You're doubling the GFA. You've been given the opportunity to put a mezzanine in. I think there's a lot that you can pack into this. But, there is a point at which it really does become, as other people have intimated, like trying to get 10 pounds of rice into a 5-pound bag. My concern around this is not necessarily parking per se, but circulation in general. I think you've mentioned other storage facilities out here on the East End, and I myself use one of them. And, my observation of the ones that I've visited, in addition to one that I'm a client of, is that there's parking. Great. There's X number of parking spots. And as Sam has mentioned, our code is still, we don't really have a specific requirement around this use. So we're a little bit hobbled in that sense. But just by my own observation, the designated parking spots really are supplemented by the fact that people who are coming in and out, and every time that I go to the one that I go to, there are 3 people, let's say, three or 4 clients of the facility there taking stuff in and out of their unit, but they all have circulation around the facility, around the building, and multiple ways of getting in. My biggest concern here is, first of all, I think there are going to be a lot of internal circulation issues if the primary way in and out of this is through the one loading dock that you've shown on the Montauk Highway side. But I think having amateur drivers, even if they're in their own cars, but if they're in rental U-Haul trucks or whatever, backing into that loading area in the front, the meshing of the parking and the loading and unloading in this very constrained area with very limited access to a facility that contains 440 units just seems, a little bit ludicrous to me. It feels to me, like others have said, that if the rest of Building A were peeled back at least to the level of where the loading dock is, there'd be a much better opportunity to avoid that. I can't see where that's not going to be a circulation nightmare. I really can't. So those are my views.
Now let's go through the questions so that we can wrap this up. Does the planning board find that the building area reduction proposed is acceptable to achieve adequate parking and circulation, considering the modified types of operation the proposed project would entail?
No.
No. Ed?
No.
Thank you. Should the applicant clarify if any consideration has been made or planned policies made regarding the disposal of abandoned items?
I think that's okay.
All right with that?
You okay with that, Steve? I mean, you have the most
I
experience.
I was concerned, but I've been told that the last time out, that the lien law 182, I think that's the law, the sales that are done under that are done by the magic of the internet now, and it's not done with people coming and going. So if that's the case, that's fine. All right. Does the planning board find that the parking is sufficient to respond to seasonal demand and meet special permit standards?
No.
No, all around. Does the planning board agree with the opinion of the applicant's consultant with respect to the potential for seasonal traffic impacts?
No, sorry.
I'm a no.
No.
No. Ed, you're a no?
No.
No. Mike?
No.
You're a no. No, all around. Does the planning board wish to waive the setbacks for the new accessory structures proposed?
I'm okay with that.
Not at this time.
Yeah, I'm also on the fence on that for right now.
If we get better,
It might play into the parking on the north end. Not north. Yeah, north end. So I'm going to
We're not
hold
ready
that in
for that
abeyance.
question yet.
Conditional.
Condition.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I'm okay with
Does
it.
the planning board, you're going to like this one. Does the planning board agree the lighting plan is acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go. And should the applicant provide additional native landscaping to more adequately screen the property?
Yes.
That's a yes. I don't know if the
Yes.
applicant necessarily wants that. but- All right, well,
He offered.
applicant, thank you very much. I know
Thank
it's, a long road and
Yeah, that's okay. Look,
All right. Thank-
I think we're getting there, so that's okay. So we're gonna take these comments and we'll be back, we'll coordinate with Tina and everybody else and we'll get there. I appreciate everyone's time and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to the last. And again, gardeners, thank you guys for sticking around. Sorry, even when there's only 3 items on the agenda, somebody's got to be last. So, Randy, this is yours. Eric, well, no, I'm sorry. You're not Eric, you're Tina.
Yeah, sorry, this is Eric's application, but Eric could not make it tonight, so I'm going to briefly go through his memo, briefly as I can. This is a site plan application for Gardner's Marina to renovate the 60-slip marina. The major change is really an expansion of the existing boat basin and the addition of a 2-story clubhouse building with a new storage building and the properties in Springs on 3 Mile Harbor, Hog Creek Road, partially cleared of naturally occurring vegetation, but contains expansive areas of tidal wetlands. There were 2 previous site plan approvals that Eric notes. So basically the issues for discussion are as follows. So regarding the boat basin enlargement and the natural resources permit, special resource permit, the planning department met with the applicants at the subject site and discussed the configuration of the proposed boat basin enlargement. In particular, the bump out that they call it, which I'm just kind of putting my mouse over here, of the bulkhead to adjacent wetlands was discussed and alternative configurations were considered. As a response, the applicants have increased the setback between this bulkhead here and the existing wetland boundary, which is right here, the closest one, by about 34 feet since the last application. The applicants have made their application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the required NRSP, and the planning department's going to continue to work with them to get the application complete so the matter can be heard by ZBA, who must decide on that particular matter. Regarding parking, the site plan is demonstrating that the code required 76 parking spaces can be situated on site, but the parking's not currently delineated. 33 of the spaces are within the main gravel parking area, 43 are with a mixture of gravel and grass. And we don't think the proposed project is going to change the parking requirement. So the board should note that pursuant to this section of the code noted here, 50% of the parking can be on grass. So it does appear to be compliant, and the board should discuss whether or not they agree. Regarding stormwater runoff, the site plan provides 2 drainage wells, 2 dry wells to control roof runoff. Regarding lighting, the lighting plan was reviewed and is acceptable. Regarding landscaping, the applicant submitted a revised comprehensive site landscaping plan. The plan indicates that some invasive species, miscanthus grasses, have been planted and are going to be removed, and also augments the evergreen screening proposed along the Mount Harbor Road with additional red cedar. And the planning board had already found the plan acceptable. However, these changes were made in response to the planning board recommendations, which is appropriate. Fire marshal has not provided his comments yet, but I understand from Eric, and Eric put in the memo that he's spoken with him, and we believe the plan is acceptable to the fire marshal. So in conclusion, provided the board agrees, the application is otherwise complete with the exceptions of the granting of a natural resource special permit by the Zoning Board of Appeals. At this point, the applicant should provide any additional information required to make the complete application. And once they've gone through ZBA, we'll be back here to do SECRA.
Very well, thank you. Applicant, please.
Good evening, Drew Bennett on behalf of the owners, consulting engineer. I'm here with Peter and Mark Mendelman, who represent the owners and the applicant. Thank you to both staff and the board for squeezing us onto the agenda. I know how busy you are after seeing tonight's hearing and the earlier ones prior to. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for your patience.
We had a very productive meeting on site in early December with Eric Shantz and Brian Frank. Some of the written comments we had received from Brian Frank were a little unclear to us, so we decided to have a site meeting so we could go over the whole thing. And I think we heard what the concerns were, and we've made best efforts to address those. I think the big issue was the size of the bump out. There was concern that the size of the bump out might have an effect on adjacent wetland areas. So the ownerships have agreed to shrink that. Everything that we filed with the planning board, we have filed with the zoning board of appeals. We've gotten comments from the zoning board of appeals back in October. We met with Brian in early December. We revised our plans and refiled in the middle of December. So as far as we know, it's complete. We're just waiting to get scheduled. So if you have any questions other than that, we're certainly here available. I don't know if you want to go through the plan in detail tonight. I'm happy to, if that's what you'd like.
Okay, let's see what the committee says.
Well, here.
Randy?
Okay, try to tick them off. There's no trustees jurisdiction here because
So the answer to that is no. We have a letter from prior applications from the East Hampton Town trustees, and we've given you a copy of that.
Okay, thank you, Drew. I had a question about the asphalt parking area. I don't see any dry wells there.
So currently the peninsula area there has asphalt. The rest of the parking is either grass or quartz gravel. And the asphalt is being reduced. The amount of asphalt there is being reduced to reduce coverage. And the perimeter of the asphalt is all gravel. It's gravel that will trap any runoff and prevent it from running into the harbor.
I just raised that as you've done all the calculations?
We have,
And you're comfortable with it?
very comfortable.
Okay.
with it, yeah.
Is there proposed to be a second access where there's a cut? There's an old access further north. And I don't understand if that's being closed or is that going to be used?
So that is an old access from, I guess, prior operations. I believe that there is a chain link fence there with a gate. So it's, at this point, it would be used as a construction entrance. We have no plans to use it as a routine entrance. It would only be used, for example, bringing in equipment to help reconstruct the bulkhead perhaps, but it's not going to be used for patrons.
So if somebody has a slip over on the north or the west side, what would they do now? They come in and go around where the bump is to get to the parking lot?
That's the way it's been for decades.
Okay. Just another, if you could remind me and maybe the other board members, your intention for the enlarged, the clubhouse. It's for, I think, do we have, I don't know if we have the narrative.
Yeah, we did. It's basically going to be it's not a catering facility. It's kind of like a go there and unwind after you've unwound on your boat.
Right. I
mean,
remember that. I'm aware that leasing, I don't know if this is part of your business, but that one of the things that marinas are allowed to do is to have people who own boats basically make them available to people who want to come and lease the boat, I don't know, for a day or for a summer or whatever. So conceivably, we would have the people who rent your slips and own the boats, and then possibly additional people who come in for a day, or is that right?
I think
we currently have all sorts of uses of boats. There's people who have seasonal boats and they just use them as themselves with their family. There's small boats that get rented by companies that go out and they come back in. They might need to use the bathroom, but the number of people on that boat is probably equivalent to the number of the people that would be on that boat if it was owned by a family anyway. And it's the same thing with the large boats. Most of the large boats are captained with six-pack captains, so it's typically a limit of 5 or 6 people on the boat. If they go bigger, I think the biggest boat might be in the low 60-foot range that's chartered by one of the charter companies that works out of there. And we haven't seen a lot of use of the clubhouse by those people because those larger boats have quite nice facilities on them regardless. They could use the clubhouse if they wanted to, but I don't think in my opinion, there's not a qualitative difference between them and say the owner of a boat who might be entertaining with guests. It doesn't change the usage much. We haven't really noticed it.
it's not going to have a bar, right? The clubhouse.
The clubhouse?
It's not.
No, I mean,
It's a couple of refrigerators and
it's going to be a couple of refrigerators, kitchenette, bathrooms are primary function, showers for people who are out boating. They get salt on them and they just want to wash off outside or inside. And I think we have laundry in there too. Which we have in existing clubhouse as well.
well, they have the staff upstairs. You have
Well, you have an office.
the
but
managers.
We don't have
There's not a waiter.
waiters.
No.
There's not
You
a
don't have
waiter.
you don't have catering staff there, right?
We don't have a catering
There's not somebody
staff.
pouring drinks for you, right?
That guy's on the boat.
There's no plan for that. And upstairs, we were planning on for office space for our dock master.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Storage.
So basically, you're just improving an old building. You're enlarging an old building to make it more comfortable and more attractive to your
And more
client.
ADA compliant, yes.
More ADA.
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
that
But
also.
those first two are very much, yes. It's a really cramped, small 1950s stucco on slab building that's falling down. And we'd like to make it more functional for the
And just Tina,
guests.
that's all in the narrative, right? We have a written narrative
I believe we
and
have-
it's all in there.
Well, the narrative, I reread the narrative, especially on this part.
Right.
And you describe what you're doing to the building, how you're renovating the existing building very clearly and in detail. You don't really give, and you just touched upon it slightly now, but you don't really give a reason as to why you need to double the footprint and, I don't know, triple the square footage of the entire building. The slips are still the same that they were in 1950s. The customer base is the same. Why do you need to expand this building? And the reason I'm bringing it up is because, I like what you're doing with the project. I think, it's important. We talk a lot about environmental concerns, water quality and all that kind of stuff, but I also appreciate that, businesses and structures and residences and all kinds of things need to get improved. And that takes money and you need to make money to pay for it and all that kind of stuff. I get all that and I'm all for it. So don't get me wrong. But on the other hand, I also don't like the fact that we're increasing density all along 3 Mile Harbor. That's a principle that's being violated in my eyes. So I need to sort of juggle those 2 points.
Sure.
And so I would like to, getting back to the narrative, you really didn't state why it's so necessary that you create such a larger structure from what was there, just renovating the current structure.
Yeah, I believe I spoke verbally to that, but we can put it in writing and narrative as well. Just part of the reason, especially for the increase in length of this, the current bathrooms are about the size of Jody Walker's desk. There are 4 of them. They're each that size. They're very small closets. There's no way they're ADA compliant. To make ADA compliant, you have to at least triple that size to get the turning radius, to get the handbars, to get all that stuff. And we need more. We have 4 bathrooms. So those are along the back wall. It makes it a little bit longer. The second story, I had said, we have a dock master who's quite aged. He's not going to be with us forever, but it'd be nice to have that dock master have an air-conditioned office where he can overlook the southern end of the harbor. And that's the thought for the second story. The first story, right now we have a single washer dryer unit. We'd like to have 2. So we put a little bit more room in for that. The current TV viewing area is probably 8 foot by 10 feet. It's a very small. We'd like to have a little bit more area for people to sit and relax. The clubhouse doesn't get used that much. People are mostly outside, but we'd like to have a nice area. And we have put in a small kitchenette, which does not exist now, where people might be able to use a microwave to warm up their coffee. So that's the reason for the larger building. The converse to maybe the prior applicant where there was a very large building, this is an extremely small building on a very large property, and we're putting in what we think is a modestly sized clubhouse. It's not huge. It's not a monstrosity. It's a good sized clubhouse that should serve its function. If you want us to describe that in writing.
Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. I think that would give the board a lot of comfort.
Sure.
Because I know we've heard that, but
I think the concern that, we all have, and I know your family is very, they're great stewards of the environment and water quality. So I think with this clubhouse, we're probably increasing the flow to the septic system.
Yeah.
I can address that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Randy, sewage and parking on this site is driven by the number of slips. That's how the code works, both the sanitary code and the town code. Technically speaking, by increasing the footprint or the floor area of the clubhouse, it goes up very small amount. I would say it's probably less than 1%, but certainly less than 5%. It's all driven by the number of slips.
Okay,
The owners have already said that they don't intend to have this as an F&B operation, food and beverage operation.
Right.
So it's the sewage and the parking is driven by the number of slips, and that doesn't change in this
In
application.
terms of the health department, but practically speaking, a second washing machine. And I don't mean to be judgmental here. I'm just being realistic.
So
If there's any,
I don't think the volume of actual gallonage going through in a week is going to change. What's going to change is that people aren't going to have to wait to use the single machine that's there when they all come back and want to wash a few beach towels at the end of the day. So.
Anybody else?
Nope.
No.
Ed, do you have anything you want?
I think it looks good.
All right.
Time for the ZBA.
All right, yeah, that's the way I see it. All right, so let's just run through. Did somebody else want to add?
Before you go through your questions, so this is a local business. There's a window to do the work. They're optimistic that they can do the work next winter, this fall into next winter. We have a long way to go yet through the zoning board. Is there any way that you could consider the secret question tonight or soon? And the reason being is that we can't complete our health department application or our New York State DEC application. And in our minds, the application is complete with the zoning board. We're just in queue. And we understand how busy everybody is.
We're gonna,
Tonight,
to do the secret, we're gonna have to, we can't do that. Well,
I have to I don't
you have to
have
do the EAF and do the.
I don't see why we have to wait for the zoning board to do it.
No, we can, well, I mean, how long will it be before you come back from the zoning? Do you have any idea where you are in the queue? Somewhere. I
Zoning
mean,
board's like
we
2
could,
months, probably.
all right, now let's see about working up the secret so that, while you're waiting for the ZBA, we can knock that off. That'll be fun. All right, so is the quantity and configuration of parking acceptable?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Lighting plan acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Landscaping plan acceptable?
Mhm.
Will the application be complete once a complete application has been submitted to the ZBA?
Yes.
What?
once the ZBA gives the
Once we get the
natural
thumbs up
resources.
from the NRSP, then we're done. But what
But what
what
about
they're asking for is that when it comes back from there, that we've already done the secret. They can go to the Suffolk County Health you need to go to? DEC is called DEC, okay. They want to see that.
Signals from the plane.
We don't do smoke signals. We'll give you a lovely resolution. How's that? Thank you. Again, thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got one item on the regular meeting, which Sharon will read on.
Okay, in the matter of the application of Sylvan Realty LLC site plan special permit, tax map number 300-161-4-9. This is to schedule the public hearing, which public hearing will be scheduled to be held at Town Hall, 159 Pentago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, April 12th of 2023 at 7 p.m. or as soon as thereafter as this matter may be heard to consider the said application.
Excuse me.
I move to adopt this.
We have the hearing on the Springs Chapel.
It's like,
Okay, isn't that the same night?
they don't.
I don't know, but I think it's fine.
Yes.
I think it's the
Is there a
same.
did you, Sharon move?
I did, I moved
Is there
to.
a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well,
I don't
any
think it's gonna
opposed?
vote.
That's an aye. Passed 6-0. Okay, we don't have anything next week, right?
2 weeks.
No meeting
2
next week,
weeks.
2
so.
weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
Oh, boy. All right, in that case, until then, can someone make a motion?
Motion close.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
No meeting next
Any
week
opposed?
Right, next
2
2
weeks.
weeks.
We are adjourned for
in
the next 2 weeks.